The world 400 million years ago was a place unrecognizable to us. No forests covered the land, no birds filled the skies, and no mammals roamed the surface. The continents were barren, rocky, and lifeless, sculpted by volcanic eruptions, floods, and the restless movements of the Earth's crust. Yet beneath the still surface of shallow seas, something extraordinary was unfolding. Life, which had long been confined to the water, was about to take its first breath on land. In these ancient seas, strange fish-like creatures swam through tangled mats of algae. Armored placoderms, heavily built fish with jaws lined in bone, ruled the underwater world, their thick plates serving as protection in a time of constant competition. Smaller creatures, like early lobe-finned fish, began experimenting with something new. Instead of delicate fins, their limbs grew stronger and fleshier, with bones that could bear weight for short periods. These fish, such as Tiktaalik, would one day give rise to the first amphibians. Evolution, through endless small steps, was preparing life for one of its boldest leaps, the conquest of land. The Earth's atmosphere was beginning to change too. Cyanobacteria and early plants had filled the air with oxygen, creating a breathable world. Mosses, liverworts, and the first simple plants began to creep onto damp shorelines, spreading across mudflats and riverbanks. Their roots broke apart rocks, slowly forming the first soil. Insects and arthropods soon followed, crawling onto land to feed on decaying plants. Millipede-like creatures became the first animals to explore the terrestrial world, and with every step they took, they paved the way for something far greater. Around 390 million years ago, the Devonian period became known as the Age of Fishes. The oceans teemed with diversity, from swift predators like Dunkleosteus, an armored monster the size of a bus, to the elegant early sharks that hunted in open waters. Yet deep within coastal lagoons and estuaries, evolution was busy crafting pioneers. Creatures like Tiktaalik rosae had both gills and primitive lungs. Its fins had wrist bones, allowing it to push itself up on muddy surfaces. It could raise its head to peer above water, seeing a world of insects and plants ready to be explored. For the first time, vertebrates were touching land, not to conquer it yet, but to survive between tides and floods. In these moments of adaptation lay the seeds of all future land animals. The climate was warm and humid, with no polar ice caps. Storms rolled across vast shallow seas that flooded continental shelves. Coral reefs flourished, providing homes for countless marine species. While life thrived in water, each evolutionary step closer to land came with immense risk. Air was deadly to gills, and gravity so gentle in water became an invisible weight, pressing down on fragile bodies. Early amphibians like Acanthostega and Ichthyostega still relied heavily on the water, returning to it to lay their eggs. They were clumsy on land, dragging their bodies with fins that had barely become legs. But they were survivors, learning to breathe air and move across new terrain. The boundary between sea and land had finally been crossed. The transition wasn't just biological, it was ecological. By moving onto land, these creatures unlocked entirely new environments. They could feed on insects, find refuge from aquatic predators, and exploit untouched resources. Over millions of years, their descendants would grow stronger limbs, develop lungs that worked efficiently, and evolve skin resistant to drying out. The amphibians of the late Devonian were the ancestors of every reptile, bird, and mammal to come. From these humble pioneers, the entire future of terrestrial life was born. Beneath the surface, the Earth itself was restless. Continents drifted slowly toward one another, shaping a new supercontinent that would one day form Panjia. Volcanic eruptions released carbon dioxide into the air, fueling plant growth, but also altering the climate. The balance between life and geology was delicate, as it would always be. The spread of plants increased oxygen levels dramatically, while drawing down carbon dioxide, cooling the planet and changing rainfall patterns. This shift in atmosphere would soon trigger new ecosystems, turning once barren landscapes into lush wetlands filled with life. By 370 million years ago, the first true forests began to appear. Towering tree-like plants called Archaeopteris grew along riverbanks, their deep roots anchoring soil and preventing erosion. Their fallen leaves decayed, enriching the earth with nutrients. Insects evolved alongside these plants, feeding on their tissues and pollinating them. A new web of life began to form, and for the first time, the land echoed with the subtle sounds of rustling leaves and crawling life. Evolution had opened a new chapter in Earth's history, the beginning of terrestrial ecosystems. These early forests also began to change the chemistry of the atmosphere. With so much vegetation, oxygen levels soared, reaching heights never seen before. This oxygen-rich world would later allow enormous insects to thrive. But for now, it was still dominated by amphibious creatures struggling to adapt. Some species evolved to stay near water, while others began venturing deeper inland, relying on moist environments to survive. Every evolutionary decision, whether to grow lungs, lay eggs on land, or develop stronger limbs, was a gamble for survival. Yet each gamble slowly pushed life further from the oceans toward full independence from the water. The Devonian period eventually came to an end, but not quietly. As continents collided and climates shifted, ecosystems began to collapse. Ocean circulation patterns changed, leading to massive oxygen depletion in the seas. Many marine species suffocated in an event now known as the Late Devonian Extinction. Coral reefs vanished, fish populations plummeted, and entire ecosystems crumbled. Yet those that survived on land found new opportunities. Amphibians, though struggling, became dominant in freshwater systems and swamps. Their success marked the beginning of the amphibian age, the first true age of vertebrate life on land. It's easy to underestimate the courage of evolution's pioneers. Each step onto land was a moment of transformation, a challenge against the limits of biology and physics. To breathe air, to carry one's body weight, to survive desiccation, all these were monumental changes. But life, in its relentless persistence, found a way. From fish that once swam in shallow lagoons, emerged creatures that would one day give rise to dinosaurs, birds, and humans. Every footprint on ancient mud was a declaration of life's determination to expand beyond boundaries. The world that began as silent rock was now alive. Green forests stretched across valleys. Rivers teemed with amphibians hunting insects along their banks. Dragonfly-like ancestors buzzed in the humid air. And in the distance, the Earth's plates continued their slow collision, building mountains that would one day form the spine of Pangaea. This was the foundation of all terrestrial life, born from the struggle of a few brave creatures who dared to crawl from the safety of the sea. Millions of years later, These early amphibians would evolve into new forms. Some would grow larger and stronger. Others would adapt to drier lands, learning to live further from water. These changes would give birth to the first reptiles, whose eggs could survive on land and whose skin resisted drying out. But for now, the Devonian world belonged to its pioneers, the first explorers of Earth's empty continents. This was not just the dawn of giants to come, it was the moment life itself learned to walk. The world that emerged after the first land pioneers had taken their steps was one of transformation and experimentation. The planet, now blanketed with the earliest forests and swampy lowlands, was breathing in a new rhythm. Oxygen levels were higher than ever before, and the atmosphere felt thick, almost heavy with moisture. This was the Carboniferous period, an age that would soon give rise to giants unlike anything that had ever existed. It was a world ruled not by dinosaurs, not yet by reptiles, but by insects and amphibians of unimaginable size. This was the age of giant insects and amphibians, when life tested the limits of how large it could grow under the influence of a supercharged atmosphere. Dense, humid forests stretched across vast continental lowlands. Towering tree-like plants, such as lepidodendron and sigillaria, rose high above the ground, their trunks covered in scaly bark and reaching heights of more than 30 meters. Beneath their towering canopies lay sprawling ferns and horsetails, forming green jungles that thrived in the warm, oxygen-rich air. These forests were the engines of the Carboniferous world, feeding on carbon dioxide and pumping oxygen back into the atmosphere. As they grew and died, their remains sank into swampy soil, beginning the slow transformation into coal, a gift and curse that would one day fuel human civilization. Within this thick, damp world, evolution was busy at work. Insects, once small and fragile, grew enormous. Dragonflies with wingspans over 70 centimeters soared through the forest air, hunting prey among the ferns. Their enormous size was possible because of the unusually high oxygen concentration, nearly 35% compared to today's 21%. This abundance of oxygen allowed arthropods to grow beyond the limits that restrain modern insects, whose breathing systems depend on passive air diffusion through tiny tubes called tracheae. Back then, every breath was a flood of oxygen, and nature used it to craft giants. Millipedes longer than a human, known as arthropleura, crawled across the forest floors, their armored bodies sliding through the damp undergrowth like segmented tanks. They were plant eaters, consuming fallen leaves and decaying vegetation, shaping the first nutrient cycles of terrestrial ecosystems. Centipedes and spiders evolved to become predators, ambushing smaller insects among the roots and decaying logs. It was a time when the sounds of buzzing, clicking, and rustling filled the air. A new symphony of life played in the shadows of giant trees. The amphibians of this age were no less extraordinary. Evolving from their Devonian ancestors, they became more adapted to terrestrial life, though they still depended on water for reproduction. Their eggs lacked shells and had to remain moist, forcing them to stay near swamps, ponds, and rivers. Some species grew massive, with bodies stretching several meters long. The most famous among them was Eogorinus, a creature that resembled a giant salamander but hunted with the ferocity of a crocodile. It lurked in the still waters of ancient swamps, waiting to strike anything that ventured too close. With jaws lined in sharp teeth and powerful limbs for swimming and crawling, it was among the top predators of its time. As the forests grew thicker, they trapped more carbon from the atmosphere. When plants died, their remains often fell into waterlogged environments where oxygen was scarce. Here, decomposition slowed to a crawl, layer upon layer of dead plant material built up over millions of years, forming the vast coal beds that define this period's legacy. The Carboniferous forests were so extensive that they altered global climate. As more carbon dioxide was locked underground, the planet began to cool slowly. Glaciers started forming near the poles. For the first time in millions of years, a subtle but crucial shift that would set the stage for the next great chapter in evolution. Amphibians adapted in different ways to this changing environment. Some evolved flat bodies and eyes positioned on top of their heads to ambush prey in shallow water. Others developed stronger limbs to move through dense forests and muddy terrain. The early tetrapods diversified into many ecological roles, some small and insect-eating, others large and carnivorous. They were the rulers of the land before reptiles took over, filling every niche available in the humid ecosystems of the Carboniferous. But with new life came new challenges. Predators grew larger, and prey had to adapt or perish. The cycle of evolution accelerated, driven by competition and changing climate. In this dynamic world, certain amphibians began to develop characteristics that would lead them toward independence from water. Their skin became thicker and less permeable. Their eggs started developing protective membranes. These early steps marked the gradual emergence of reptiles, creatures that could finally reproduce away from the swamps and ponds, opening the door to life in dry environments. Deep underground, another transformation was taking place. As decaying plant matter was buried under layers of sediment, heat and pressure began compressing it into peat and eventually into coal. This process would take millions of years, but the result would be one of the most important geological legacies in Earth's history. The Carboniferous coal deposits would one day power the Industrial Revolution, shaping the modern world. Yet for the creatures of that time, these forests were simply home a dense, humid labyrinth where survival meant constant adaptation. The world was far from stable. Tectonic forces continued to move the continents slowly, bringing them closer together. The gradual assembly of the supercontinent Panjia was already in motion, reshaping ocean currents and weather patterns. Volcanic activity increased in certain regions, injecting ash and carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. While the forests helped absorb much of it, the balance between oxygen and carbon dioxide was delicate. A small disruption could alter the entire climate, and nature was always on the edge of transformation. As the period progressed, certain regions began to experience drier conditions. The lush swamps started to retreat, replaced by more seasonal environments. Amphibians that had thrived in waterlogged forests faced new threats. Many species could not adapt to the decreasing humidity and shrinking wetlands. But for others, this was an opportunity. Those with tougher skin and eggs that could survive out of water found new freedom. These were the first true reptiles, descendants of amphibians that had solved the problem of reproduction on land. With shelled eggs, they no longer needed to return to water to breed, and with more efficient lungs and dry, scaly skin, they could live in places amphibians could not. Evolution had just handed the keys of the world to a new kind of creature. Meanwhile, the oxygen-rich environment reached its peak. Fires became a frequent occurrence in the vast forests, ignited by lightning strikes that found ready fuel in the dense plant matter. These wildfires, though destructive, played an essential role in recycling nutrients back into the soil. The constant cycle of growth, decay, and fire maintained the balance of carbon and oxygen in the atmosphere. Ecosystems grew resilient, capable of recovering from disasters, but as the forests expanded further and more carbon was locked away, the planet's cooling trend intensified. By the end of the Carboniferous, ice sheets had spread across the southern hemisphere, signaling the beginning of a new ice age. The lush tropical forests started to collapse under the changing climate. With their retreat came the decline of the giant insects and many of the amphibian species that had once dominated. Oxygen levels began to fall again, and the massive arthropods that had thrived in the dense air could no longer survive. The world was entering a period of extinction and transition, a prelude to the age of reptiles. But even as many species vanished, others adapted to the new conditions. Reptiles, with their dry skin and amniotic eggs, flourished where amphibians could not. They spread into the newly formed deserts and uplands, feeding on the insects that still populated the planet. Small, lizard-like creatures began to appear, their bodies sleek and built for survival in dry environments. They represented the future, the next evolutionary step toward the great age of reptiles and, eventually, dinosaurs. Looking back, the Carboniferous period stands as one of the most transformative chapters in Earth's history. It was a time when the planet's systems, geological, biological, and atmospheric, became deeply intertwined. Forests shaped the air shaped the creatures, and the creatures reshaped the land. The very coal that powered human civilization was born from the corpses of these ancient trees, compressed under millions of years of geological time. Every breath we take, every flame that burns fossil fuel, carries a trace of that ancient, oxygen-rich world. It was also an age of balance between creation and destruction. While evolution filled the planet with new life forms, natural forces constantly reset the stage. Volcanic eruptions, shifting continents, and ice ages ensured that no species could dominate forever. The Carboniferous taught evolution a fundamental lesson: adapt or perish. And those that adapted laid the foundation for all that would follow. As the period came to a close, the world began to change its face. Swamps dried, forests thinned, and the first deserts spread across the land. Amphibians retreated into wetter regions, while reptiles claimed the dry plains and rocky highlands. The Earth's skies, once filled with giant dragonflies, grew quieter. But beneath the fading canopy of the ancient forests, new life prepared for its turn. Evolution never rested. The age of amphibians and insects had reached its peak and was slowly giving way to a new empire, the reign of reptiles. The planet was preparing for its next transformation. Tectonic plates continued to push together, building mountain ranges and fusing continents into one vast landmass. The air grew cooler, and seasons became more pronounced. Ecosystems reorganized, and extinction events pruned away species that could not cope. Yet each collapse made room for innovation, for new life forms better suited to the changing world. From the ashes of the Carboniferous, a new era would emerge, the Permian, when reptiles would dominate and set the stage for the rise of the most extraordinary creatures the Earth had ever known. The story of the Carboniferous is not just about the birth of giants. It is about the power of the planet itself, how chemistry, climate, and evolution work together to create and destroy worlds. The ancient forests that once towered over the land are gone, their remains buried deep beneath our feet, turned into coal and stone. But their legacy endures in the oxygen we breathe and in the history of life's endless struggle to adapt, this was the world of the Carboniferous, the age of giant insects and amphibians, of endless green forests and sweltering air, of creatures that dared to grow beyond the limits of their ancestors. It was a time of firsts and extremes, when life learned how to master land, air, and water alike. And though this world would eventually fall, its spirit of adaptation would echo across the ages, shaping everything that came after. For the next great chapter was already beginning the dawn of reptiles and the slow march toward the age of dinosaurs. The age of giant insects and amphibians slowly faded, but in its place emerged something even more profound: the rise of reptiles. It was a turning point in Earth's history, a biological revolution that would forever change the balance of life on land. The Carboniferous had been a world of moisture and swamps, where amphibians thrived but remained tied to water. Now, the planet was drying, cooling, and reshaping itself. The lush forests that once stretched endlessly began to vanish, replaced by dry woodlands and open plains. Those who could not adapt would perish, but those who could evolve beyond the need for water would inherit the earth. It began with a single innovation: an egg. Not just any egg, but one wrapped in a tough, protective shell. This was the amniotic egg, one of evolution's greatest inventions. It allowed embryos to develop safely on land, protected from drying out. Within it, life carried its own tiny ocean, a sealed world where a developing creature could grow independently from ponds and streams. This single adaptation freed reptiles from the bondage of water, letting them colonize deserts, mountains, and forests where amphibians could never survive. The first reptiles were small, agile, and cautious. They looked like lizards, but were the product of profound evolutionary change. Their skin was dry and scaly, preventing water loss. Their lungs were more efficient, allowing them to breathe air deeply and sustain life under the blazing sun. And their posture, though still sprawling, was stronger and more stable. These pioneers included creatures like Hylonomus, one of the earliest true reptiles, which lived around 310 million years ago. It scurried across the fallen logs of the dying Carboniferous forests, hunting insects among the roots of ancient trees. In its tiny form lay the blueprint for all reptiles, from turtles to snakes to dinosaurs. As the Carboniferous world gave way to the Permian period, roughly 299 million years ago, the continents were slowly converging into one colossal landmass, Panjia. It was a supercontinent, stretching from pole to pole, surrounded by a vast global ocean called Panthalassa. The interior of Panjia was harsh and dry, far from the moisture of the seas. Vast deserts spread across its heart, and temperatures fluctuated wildly between scorching days and freezing nights. For amphibians, this world was a death sentence, but for reptiles, it was a new frontier. The reptiles began to diversify rapidly. Some evolved to become swift hunters, others to feed on the new types of plants that had begun to appear. The lineages of early reptiles split into two main branches: the synapsids, which would eventually give rise to mammals, and the sauropsids, which would lead to modern reptiles and birds. This split marked the beginning of a long evolutionary rivalry that would shape life on Earth for the next 250 million years. The synapsids were particularly successful. Their skulls had a single temporal opening behind each eye socket, allowing for stronger jaw muscles and more efficient chewing. This gave them a significant advantage over their cold-blooded cousins. One of the earliest dominant synapsids was Dimetrodon, a creature that has often been mistaken for a dinosaur, but lived long before them. Dimetrodon stood out with a large sail on its back, an array of elongated vertebral spines covered in skin. Scientists believe this sail helped regulate body temperature, absorbing sunlight in the morning and dissipating heat later in the day. It was among the first land predators to truly dominate its ecosystem, feeding on smaller reptiles and amphibians with serrated teeth that hinted at the future of carnivorous evolution. As reptiles spread across Panjia, plants continued to evolve as well. The ancient forests of ferns and lycopods were replaced by gymnosperms, plants with seeds protected by cones like modern pines and cycads. Unlike their predecessors, these plants no longer depended on water for reproduction. Their seeds could survive dry conditions, just like reptile eggs. The bond between plant and animal evolution was once again clear. Each adapted to support the other's success. Where amphibians and ferns once ruled, now reptiles and seed plants thrive together in the dry winds of Pangaea. But life in this new world was not easy. The interior of Pangaea faced extreme climates, long droughts, violent storms, and temperature swings that tested every living creature. Some reptiles evolved new strategies for survival. Paleozoics, large herbivores covered in bony armor, fed on tough vegetation. Their thick bodies and slow movements were built for endurance rather than speed. Other species became swift hunters, evolving long legs and keen senses to chase prey across open plains. These were the ancestors of the archosaurs, the ruling reptiles that would one day give birth to crocodiles, pterosaurs, and dinosaurs. Beneath the surface, Earth's geology was shifting violently. Massive volcanic eruptions released clouds of ash and carbon dioxide into the air, altering the planet's climate. Mountain ranges formed as continental plates collided. Rivers changed course. Lakes dried up, and new deserts appeared. Yet, through every upheaval, reptiles endured. They were built for survival in a world that no longer offered comfort. While amphibians clung to the shrinking wetlands, reptiles marched forward, expanding into every corner of the globe. The seas, too, were changing. New species of marine reptiles began to appear, adapting to life in saltwater environments. Some, like mesozoic, were among the first reptiles to return to the oceans after their ancestors had left them behind. Sleek and agile, they hunted fish and small invertebrates, proving that evolution never moved in just one direction. Life was flexible, always ready to reclaim old habitats if the opportunity arose. As the Permian period progressed, reptilian dominance became absolute. Synapsids grew larger and more diverse, producing predators like gorgonopsids, fierce hunters with saber-like teeth and advanced sensory systems. They were warm-blooded, or at least partially so, giving them an advantage in cooler climates. Their complex metabolism hinted at what would one day become the mammalian way of life: active, fast, and intelligent. Meanwhile, the sauropsids continued to adapt, their descendants slowly becoming more specialized for the roles they would play in the next great age. The Permian world was both beautiful and dangerous. Vast conifer forests covered mountain slopes, while deserts stretched endlessly across Pangaea's heart. Rivers teemed with fish and amphibians, but the land belonged to the reptiles. Storms swept across the continents, carrying dust and sand, reshaping the surface of the earth itself. This world, though ancient, had begun to resemble something familiar, a planet of varied biomes, diverse life, and intricate ecosystems. Evolution was building the foundations of modern biodiversity, but just as life reached its zenith, catastrophe approached beneath the vast supercontinent. The Earth's crust was restless. In what is now Siberia, immense volcanic activity began to tear the land apart. Lava flowed endlessly, covering millions of square kilometers. The eruptions released massive amounts of carbon dioxide and sulfur into the atmosphere, triggering climate chaos. Acid rain fell upon the forests, killing plants and poisoning rivers. The oceans turned acidic and lost oxygen, suffocating marine life. The chain reaction of destruction was unstoppable. This event, known as the Permian extinction or the Great Dying, was the most devastating catastrophe in the history of life. Over 90% of marine species and 70% of land species vanished. Entire ecosystems collapsed, and even the mighty Dimetrodon and Gorgonopsids disappeared forever. Volcanic gases created a greenhouse effect that raised global temperatures to deadly levels, while toxic gases and falling oxygen made the air difficult to breathe. The once thriving world of reptiles and forests turned into barren wastelands of ash and silence. But not all perished. A few small reptiles, particularly the archosaurs, survived in isolated pockets of stability. Their resilience would soon reshape the world again. From the ashes of extinction, evolution would rise anew, stronger and more creative than before. The age of amphibians and early reptiles was over, but it had paved the way for something far greater. As the Earth began to heal, new forms of life started to emerge from the remnants of the old world. The ecosystems rebuilt themselves slowly, and the surviving reptiles diversified into new lineages. The stage was now set for the next era of dominance, when creatures of unimaginable size and power would rule the land, the sea, and the sky. This new age would belong to the dinosaurs. The story of the early reptiles is the story of adaptation against all odds. It is about life's ability to transform under pressure, to survive when the world collapses around it. From the swamps of the Carboniferous to the deserts of the Permian, evolution's path was guided not by comfort, but by necessity. Every extinction, every change in climate, and every geological upheaval shaped the creatures that would follow. And as the Permian world faded into darkness, the next sunrise would illuminate a transformed planet, a world ready for giants. The rise of reptiles was more than a change in species. It was a change in destiny. It marked the beginning of the Mesozoic era, the dawn of the great reptiles that would one day dominate every corner of the planet. But before their reign could begin, Earth had to endure one of the darkest chapters in its history, a global catastrophe that would erase nearly all life and reset the story of evolution itself. From that darkness, a new age would rise, and with it, the true rulers of the ancient world, the dinosaurs. The Permian world lay silent. The air, once filled with the roars of predators and the calls of amphibians, had grown still. The forests that stretched across Panjia's vast continents were blackened and dead, buried beneath layers of volcanic ash. The Great Dying had left the planet almost empty. More than 9 out of 10 species were gone, erased in a geological heartbeat. Oceans turned into stagnant, oxygen-starved wastelands. The sky shimmered with heat, and toxic gases lingered in the air. The surface of the Earth, for the first time in hundreds of millions of years, seemed lifeless. But life, as it always had, found a way. In the aftermath of the extinction, the few survivors began to rebuild the biosphere. It took millions of years for ecosystems to recover, but evolution was patient. The world that emerged from the ashes of the Permian was different, simpler at first, but full of potential. Gone were the great forests of the Carboniferous and the massive synapsids that had ruled the land. The survivors were small, adaptable creatures that could withstand chaos. Among them were the ancestors of a new dynasty, the Archosaurs. The early Triassic, about 252 million years ago, marked a slow dawn. The continents of Panjia still stretched from pole to pole, creating vast arid interiors with brutal climates. Summers were scorching, winters bitterly cold, rainfall was scarce, and deserts stretched endlessly across the supercontinent's heart. Yet, in small oases and along the coasts, life began to stir again. New plant species, mainly seed ferns, cycads, and conifers, took root in the scorched earth, forming patches of green that became sanctuaries for recovering life. In these fragile ecosystems, reptiles once again took center stage. The great synapsids that had ruled the Permian were gone, but their smaller, more resilient descendants survived. They shared the land with the emerging archosaurs, reptiles that stood taller, moved faster, and breathed more efficiently. These creatures were built for the harsh new world. Some resembled crocodiles, others were upright and agile, capable of sprinting across open ground. Among them were the ancestors of the dinosaurs, and though they were still small, they possessed something their competitors lacked: an advantage of design. Archosaurs had a new kind of breathing system, one that pumped air through their lungs in a single direction rather than in and out. This made them more efficient, allowing them to thrive in low-oxygen environments where other creatures struggled. Their strong limbs, positioned more vertically under their bodies, allowed for better movement and endurance. Evolution had forged them in the fires of extinction, giving them the tools to dominate the next era. As the Triassic period unfolded, the Earth began to heal. Plant life spread again, carpeting the land in green. Rivers returned, bringing life to dry plains. Insects diversified, and with them came a resurgence of amphibians, though they would never regain their former dominance. Small mammal like reptiles, the cynodonts, survived as well, hiding in burrows and forests, clinging to survival in the shadows of the rising archosaurs. They were warm-blooded and quick, the ancestors of future mammals. The world was still unstable. Volcanic activity continued to reshape landscapes, and the atmosphere remained unpredictable. Yet, evolution thrived under such pressure. Among the archosaurs, two distinct lineages began to emerge. One gave rise to crocodile-like reptiles, adapted for life in water and along riverbanks. The other evolved into lighter, more upright forms, the first dinosaurs. These early dinosaurs were not the massive giants we imagine today. They were small, swift, and agile, about the size of dogs or wolves. Creatures like Eoraptor and Herorasaurus darted through the forests of the late Triassic, hunting insects, small reptiles, and even each other. They stood on two legs, their long tails providing balance, their sharp claws and teeth built for precision. Their agility gave them an edge in survival and hunting. While the world's larger reptiles moved slowly under the intense heat, dinosaurs could move quickly and efficiently, conserving energy and thriving where others faltered. The oceans, too, were transforming. New marine reptiles evolved to dominate the waters. Ichthyosaurs, sleek, dolphin-shaped predators, emerged as the new rulers of the seas, gliding gracefully through the depths in search of fish and cephalopods. They were perfectly adapted to aquatic life, breathing air, yet living entirely in the water. Other creatures, like the long-necked nothosaurs, patrolled coastlines, using their limbs to paddle through shallow bays. These early marine reptiles marked the beginning of a new wave of evolution that would soon fill the oceans with monsters. As life recovered, diversity exploded once more. Plants, animals, and insects filled the ecological voids left by the Permian disaster. Forests grew thicker, food chains became more complex, and competition drove rapid evolution. The Triassic became a world of experimentation, where countless forms of life emerged, some to vanish quickly, others to endure and evolve. Among the land's new predators were the Rauisuchians, massive reptilian hunters that ruled before the dinosaurs rose to true dominance. They walked on 4 legs, but their hind limbs were longer and more powerful, allowing them to rear up and strike with terrifying speed. For a time, they were the apex predators of the Triassic. But evolution was about to change the rules again. As the Triassic period neared its end, Earth faced yet another wave of extinction, smaller than the Permian catastrophe, but still devastating. Volcanic activity once again unleashed massive amounts of carbon dioxide, warming the planet and disrupting ecosystems. Many of the dominant reptiles, including the Rauisuchians, vanished. But the dinosaurs, small and adaptable, survived and flourished. Their endurance through this crisis allowed them to rise unchecked into the Jurassic period, the age when they would become true giants. The rise of the archosaurs marked one of the greatest evolutionary recoveries in Earth's history. From the brink of annihilation, life had reinvented itself. In less than 10 million years, ecosystems had rebounded from near total collapse to new heights of diversity and complexity. This was the resilience of life, a force that could rebuild even after the greatest catastrophe. The Triassic world stood as a bridge between 2 eras, the age of ancient reptiles that had begun in the Carboniferous and the coming age of dinosaurs that would define the next 160 million years. Panjia, though still whole, was beginning to show cracks. Tectonic rifts split its surface, hinting at the birth of new oceans that would one day divide the continents. Climates shifted once more, and the Earth prepared for another transformation. And so, from the ashes of the Permian, the seeds of greatness were sown. The small, nimble dinosaurs that had survived the Triassic would soon grow into colossal forms, towering sauropods, fierce carnivores, and winged rulers of the skies. The world was ready for its next act, a chapter of immense power and beauty, where life would reach its peak in both size and diversity. The age of the dinosaurs was dawning, and in that dawning light, the world once again began to roar. The dawn of the dinosaurs began quietly, almost humbly, in the aftermath of chaos. There were no sudden eruptions of dominance, no instant takeover of the planet. Instead, evolution moved with subtle precision, shaping small, fast, intelligent creatures that would eventually become the rulers of Earth. It was the start of the Jurassic period around 201 million years ago, an era that transformed the fragile survivors of the Triassic into the most magnificent creatures to ever walk the land. The world itself was changing once again. Panjia, the vast supercontinent that had stretched across the globe for millions of years, had begun to crack and break apart. Immense tectonic forces pulled it in different directions, splitting it into northern and southern landmasses, Laurasia in the north and Gondwana in the south. Volcanic rifts opened across the planet, filling the air with carbon dioxide and ash. But unlike the catastrophic eruptions of the past, this time the changes brought renewal. Global temperatures rose, the air grew thick with humidity, and rainfall increased. Deserts shrank, and vast new forests spread across the continents. It was as if the earth was breathing again after ages of dryness and dust. These lush, humid landscapes became the perfect cradle for dinosaur evolution. Where once reptiles had to fight for survival, now abundance returned. Rivers meandered through fern-covered valleys. Towering conifer trees formed dense canopies, while cycads and ginkgos filled the undergrowth. In these new, thriving ecosystems, dinosaurs found their stage, and they grew into it magnificently. The earliest dinosaurs of the Jurassic were still modest in size, but they carried the seeds of greatness. From small, bipedal hunters like Coelophysis and Dilophosaurus came the lineage of predators that would later dominate every continent. Their bodies were built for speed, long tails for balance, hollow bones for lightness, and powerful legs that could propel them in bursts of incredible agility. They hunted in packs, coordinated by instinct and survival. Their sharp, curved teeth tore through the flesh of smaller reptiles, early mammals, and even their own kind. Evolution favored the swift, the clever, and the adaptable, and the dinosaurs embodied all three. As predators evolved, so did the plant eaters. Some of the earliest giant herbivores appeared during this time. Species like Plateosaurus and later the immense Brachiosaurus were among the first true titans of the land. Their long necks allowed them to reach the treetops, feeding where no other animal could. They were slow, but strong, their sheer size enough to deter all but the most determined predators. By growing enormous, they reshaped entire ecosystems, clearing forests, spreading seeds through their droppings, and maintaining the cycle of plant growth and regrowth that sustained the Jurassic world. The oceans too were awakening with new life. Ichthyosaurs ruled the deep, streamlined and graceful, chasing shoals of fish through the blue. But new giants were rising to challenge them. Plesiosaurs, marine reptiles with long necks and paddle-like limbs glided through the waters, their heads darting swiftly to snatch prey. Their reign extended across every ocean, from the shallow coastal seas to the open abyss. And above the water, the skies belonged to another kind of reptile, the pterosaurs. These winged creatures were the first vertebrates to truly conquer the air. Their wings, made of stretched membranes of skin supported by elongated fingers, allowed them to soar with astonishing grace. Some were no larger than sparrows, while others, like Dimorphodon, had wingspans over 2 meters. They nested along cliffs, hunting fish and small land animals, their silhouettes darkening the sky. The age of flying reptiles had begun, setting the stage for one of evolution's most incredible achievements, the eventual rise of birds. On land, dinosaurs diversified at a breathtaking pace. The Jurassic period was a laboratory of evolution, producing an explosion of forms and adaptations. Armor-plated stegosaurs roamed the plains, using their spiked tails for defense. Massive sauropods thundered through forests, shaking the ground beneath their feet. Smaller herbivores evolved new strategies, speed, camouflage, and group behavior to survive among predators that were growing larger and smarter. And among those predators were the first great theropods, the ancestors of the fearsome tyrannosaurs and raptors that would come later. Creatures like Allosaurus and Megalosaurus were apex hunters of their time, armed with powerful jaws, razor-sharp claws, and binocular vision. They hunted in packs or alone, capable of bringing down prey far larger than themselves. Their success ensured that carnivorous dinosaurs would remain at the top of the food chain for more than 100 million years. As the continents drifted apart, isolation gave rise to diversity. Each region of the world developed its own distinct dinosaur populations, shaped by climate, geography, and vegetation. In the north, lush jungles and fern-covered wetlands supported herds of sauropods and ornithopods. In the south, arid plains gave rise to hardier species adapted to drought and heat. Evolution sculpted life to fit every corner of the globe, and for the first time, dinosaurs truly dominated both hemispheres. But the Jurassic was more than just an age of giants. It was also an age of transformation. Deep within the forests, small, feathered dinosaurs scurried through the undergrowth. Though most would never grow large, they carried a secret adaptation that would change the course of evolution. Feathers. Originally evolved for insulation or display, feathers would one day grant the power of flight. From these small, bird-like dinosaurs would emerge the first true birds, creatures like Archaeopteryx, which blurred the line between reptile and avian. With wings tipped in feathers and teeth still lining its beak, Archaeopteryx took to the skies of the Jurassic, its flight uncertain but full of promise. Meanwhile, Earth's climate continued to shift. Volcanic activity enriched the air with carbon dioxide, fueling plant growth and maintaining a greenhouse world. The polar regions were warm and wet, covered in forests rather than ice. The entire planet pulsed with life, from the equator to the poles. Yet, beneath this thriving surface, the forces of geology never rested. Panjia's breakup accelerated, opening new oceans and shaping new coastlines. With these changes came powerful storms, flooding, and gradual shifts in ecosystems. As the Jurassic period drew toward its later stages, dinosaurs had become the undisputed masters of the planet. They ruled every environment on land, in the sea, and in the air. Their dominance was unparalleled, their diversity staggering. From the smallest feathered hunters to the largest sauropods ever to live, they defined the planet's ecosystems in ways no group of animals ever had before. And yet, for all their success, the seeds of their eventual fate were already being sown deep within the Earth's crust. The same tectonic forces that had given rise to their world would one day tear it apart again. The Jurassic's peaceful abundance would give way to the Cretaceous, a new era of expansion, innovation, and ultimately, extinction. But for now, the planet belonged to the dinosaurs. The once silent world of the early Triassic had become a symphony of roars, cries, and thunderous footsteps. The Earth had awakened from its long slumber, and in its awakening, it had created the greatest empire nature would ever know. From the forests to the mountains, from the shallow seas to the skies, life thrived in every form imaginable. The age of giants had truly begun, and their reign was only just starting. The Jurassic world had given rise to a thriving empire of dinosaurs that stretched from one edge of the planet to the other. Life pulsed through the forests, plains, and oceans like never before. But as millions of years passed, the Earth continued its slow transformation. Continents drifted farther apart, oceans deepened, and climates changed. The planet was entering a new age, the Cretaceous period, beginning around 145 million years ago. It would be the longest chapter in the dinosaurs' reign and the most magnificent. It was a world where life reached its evolutionary peak in power, diversity, and beauty. As Pangaea continued to fragment, new continents began forming. North America, South America, Africa, Europe, Asia, and Australia slowly took shape. This separation created barriers of ocean and mountain, isolating animal populations and forcing them to adapt in unique ways. The result was an explosion of new species. Evolution thrived in isolation, giving rise to a breathtaking variety of dinosaurs that filled every niche imaginable. The Cretaceous world was lush and vibrant. Flowering plants appeared for the first time in Earth's history, transforming landscapes that had long been dominated by conifers and ferns. These new plants, angiosperms, evolved colorful petals and sweet nectar to attract insects for pollination. The relationship between flowers and insects began here, forming the foundation for modern ecosystems. With the arrival of flowers came new scents, new foods, and new opportunities. Herbivorous dinosaurs adapted to feed on these plants, developing more complex jaws and teeth to grind the tougher vegetation. As the flora diversified, so too did the fauna. Vast herds of herbivores roamed the plains, shaping the land with their movement. Among them were the great hadrosaurs, duck-billed dinosaurs that grazed in groups so large they could stretch across valleys. Their social behavior was sophisticated. Some species built nesting grounds, cared for their young, and communicated through deep, resonant calls that echoed across the forests. They lived under constant watch from predators, but their strength was in numbers. In the open plains of what would one day become North America, enormous ceratopsians evolved horned dinosaurs like Triceratops, with massive skulls adorned by bony frills and long spear-like horns. These creatures were the tanks of the Cretaceous, built for defense and intimidation. When predators threatened, they would form protective circles around their young, facing outward with horns ready. Entire battles between Triceratops herds and their greatest enemy, Tyrannosaurus rex, would become some of the most dramatic confrontations in prehistoric history. And then there were the armored giants, the ankylosaurs, low, squat herbivores, encased in bony plates like living fortresses. Their tails ended in massive clubs, capable of shattering bone with a single swing. Evolution had turned them into walking tanks, perfect for survival in a world ruled by predators. But no matter how many defenses evolved, there was always a new hunter ready to test them. The Cretaceous period was the golden age of carnivorous dinosaurs in the southern continents. Enormous predators like Giganotosaurus and Carnotaurus ruled. They hunted in open plains, relying on speed and brute strength to bring down prey many times their size. Their teeth were serrated like knives, their jaws designed to slice through flesh and bone. In the north, Tyrannosaurus rex reigned supreme, the apex of all terrestrial predators. Standing nearly 4 meters tall at the hips and weighing over 8 tons, it was the culmination of millions of years of evolutionary refinement. Its bite force was unmatched, capable of crushing through the skulls of its victims. The oceans, too, had their titans. Mosasaurs, massive marine reptiles, related to lizards, became the uncontested rulers of the seas. Their bodies were long and muscular, their tails built for swift propulsion. They hunted everything that moved: fish, squid, even other marine reptiles. In the depths, ammonites drifted by the millions, their coiled shells shimmering beneath the sunlight that filtered through the water. The seas of the Cretaceous were a realm of perpetual motion, where life was both beautiful and brutal. And above all of this, the skies were alive. Pterosaurs reached their peak, evolving into enormous forms like Quetzalcoatlus, with wingspans rivaling small aeroplanes. They soared effortlessly on warm air currents, gliding over forests and oceans in search of prey. And among them, the first true birds had taken flight. Descendants of small feathered theropods, these creatures were light, agile, and intelligent. Their feathers, once tools for warmth or display, had become instruments of flight. Some still had claws and teeth, remnants of their dinosaur ancestry, but they were unmistakably birds, the heirs to a future long beyond the dinosaurs. Beneath this vibrant life, the Earth was still restless. Volcanic activity continued across the planet, shaping mountains and rifts. The breakup of continents caused changes in ocean circulation and climate. The poles grew colder, and sea levels fluctuated. Vast inland seas appeared and disappeared across continents, turning dry lands into shallow marine environments teeming with new life. Every change in the planet's structure forced life to adapt, and evolution responded with brilliance. As the Cretaceous progressed, dinosaurs became more specialized than ever before. Herbivores evolved new defenses, predators developed new hunting strategies, and smaller animals carved out niches in the shadows of giants. Mammals, still tiny and nocturnal, continued to evolve quietly in the background, learning to survive unnoticed among the giants that ruled the day. They ate insects, hid in burrows, and waited. Though insignificant in size, they carried within them the future of life after the dinosaurs' fall. The planet's biodiversity reached its peak around 75 million years ago. Forests were dense, rivers wide, and coastlines rich with coral reefs. Every ecosystem, whether on land, in the air, or under the sea, was interconnected. The balance of nature seemed eternal. Yet beneath the surface of this thriving world, destruction was quietly approaching. Deep in space, a rock was on its way, an asteroid more than 10 kilometers wide, traveling faster than any sound could carry. For now, the dinosaurs knew nothing of their fate. They continued to roam the Earth, their world filled with color, sound, and life. From the thunderous footsteps of sauropods shaking the ground to the haunting cries of pterosaurs echoing through twilight skies, the Cretaceous planet was alive in a way it had never been before. The Earth itself was a paradise of giants and beauty. Continents glowed under tropical suns, mountain ranges pierced the clouds, vast jungles stretched as far as the eye could see. Even the air was thick with the scent of blooming flowers and the hum of insects. It was the peak of life's creative power, the high point of the age of dinosaurs. And yet, as history has always shown, every empire has its end. The Cretaceous world was about to face its greatest test, an event so violent and final that it would erase the rulers of Earth in a single day. But from their ashes, new life would rise smaller, cleverer, and ready to inherit a transformed planet. For now, though, the world belonged to them. The dinosaurs stood unmatched masters of land, sea, and sky, living monuments to evolution's endless imagination. They were the culmination of millions of years of struggle and adaptation. And as they roamed their golden world, the countdown to their final chapter had already begun. The world was no longer young, but it was far from still. After millions of years of quiet rebuilding, life had returned to the planet stronger than ever. The Triassic world, once dry and harsh, had given birth to the first true dinosaurs. Small and swift, they ran through fern-covered valleys and hunted across dusty plains. But the Jurassic period would change everything. It was here, around 180 million years ago, that life began to dream bigger, literally. Evolution, given time, warmth, and stability, began to shape giants. The air was thick and warm, heavy with moisture and rich with oxygen. Volcanic activity filled the skies with dust and minerals that fed the land. Forests of conifers, cycads, and ginkgos blanketed the earth, creating a paradise for plant-eating creatures. The world was becoming green again, vibrant again, alive again. And in this green world, size became a weapon. The first great plant eaters, the sauropods, began to appear. Their bodies were immense, long necks stretched toward the treetops, and tails balanced their massive frames like living bridges between the earth and sky. Creatures like Vulcanodon and later Diplodocus moved through the forests in slow rolling herds. Each footstep shook the ground. Each swing of a tail could flatten a small tree. They ate endlessly, stripping leaves from the highest branches, shaping the forests as they moved. But being enormous came with a price. Their bodies demanded constant energy, and their hearts had to work harder than any animal before them. Some sauropods developed enormous hearts and powerful circulatory systems, capable of pushing blood all the way up their towering necks. Their lungs evolved with an air sac system, allowing continuous airflow, an innovation that made them among the most efficient breathers in history. These adaptations turned them into the most successful herbivores Earth had ever seen. Where there were plant eaters, predators followed. From the lineage of smaller Triassic hunters came new, larger killers theropods built for both power and precision. Allosaurus, the apex predator of the late Jurassic, ruled the land with cunning and strength. Its jaws could crush bone, and its arms, though small, were strong enough to hold struggling prey. It hunted in packs or alone, stalking the great herds of sauropods that moved across the plains. When an Allosaurus attacked, the forest erupted in chaos. The Jurassic landscape itself was alive with movement. Ferns carpeted the ground, while towering trees created endless green canopies. Rivers meandered through the plains, carrying life into every corner of the continent. Insects buzzed through the air, and the first true birds had begun to take flight. Small, feathered creatures that glided from tree to tree. They were the descendants of small theropod dinosaurs. Their feathers first used not for flight, but for warmth and display. In them lay the future of the skies. Volcanoes still roared across the planet, their eruptions painting the sunsets in blood red and gold. Continents drifted slowly apart, tearing Panjia into pieces. These new ocean basins brought moisture inland, creating a humid, tropical climate that stretched from pole to pole. Rainforests flourished where deserts once lay. The planet had become a greenhouse, and life thrived in its warmth. On the ground, the balance of life was delicate yet powerful. Giant herbivores shaped the land, eating constantly and spreading plant seeds wherever they roamed. Smaller dinosaurs darted between their feet, scavenging fallen leaves and feeding on insects. Early mammals, no larger than mice, lived in burrows, coming out only at night to avoid the giants above. They fed on eggs, insects, and fruit-quiet survivors in a world of thunder. As the Jurassic world expanded, so did the diversity of dinosaurs. Stegosaurs appeared, their backs lined with bony plates that glistened under the sun. Scientists believe these plates may have helped regulate temperature or served as display features during mating rituals. Their tails ended in deadly spikes, a perfect defense against predators. Each new species represented a new experiment in survival, shaped by an environment that rewarded both size and specialization. The skies, once ruled only by insects, now belonged to the pterosaurs, reptiles, that had mastered flight long before birds. Their wings stretched wide, made of thin membranes supported by a single elongated finger. Some were small as sparrows. Others, like Pteranodon, reached wingspans of over 7 meters. They soared over oceans and cliffs, diving to catch fish with needle-like teeth. The Earth, for the first time, had creatures that ruled every realm: land, sea, and air. Beneath the seas, life was equally dramatic. Ichthyosaurs, shaped like dolphins, but with the eyes of predators, hunted swift schools of fish. Plesiosaurs glided through the water with long necks and paddle-like limbs. They were the masters of the Jurassic oceans, powerful and graceful, their bodies built for endless motion. Coral reefs flourished in shallow waters, teeming with early ammonites, coiled, shelled creatures whose patterns would one day fossilize into works of art. For millions of years, the Earth remained stable, a paradise of equilibrium. The climate was warm, the oxygen high, and the ecosystems balanced. This was the age when dinosaurs became not just survivors, but rulers. Evolution, given time and freedom, sculpted them into forms of breathtaking diversity. From the armored and the horned to the feathered and the fanged, they filled every niche imaginable. But change is the only constant in Earth's story. Deep within the planet, tectonic forces were shifting again. Volcanoes grew restless. Continents continued to drift farther apart, creating new coastlines and isolating species. With isolation came evolution's favorite tool, divergence. Dinosaurs in different parts of the world began to develop unique traits in what would become Africa and South America. New species of sauropods grew even larger, their necks longer, their bodies more massive. In North America, predatory dinosaurs evolved sharper senses and faster reflexes. Storms swept across the planet more frequently as climates fluctuated. Lush forests gave way to drier plains in some regions, and dinosaurs adapted accordingly. Some herbivores developed broader teeth for grinding tough vegetation. Others, like the ornithopods, evolved speed to escape predators rather than armor to confront them. Evolution was shaping the balance of power again, preparing the stage for the next transformation, the rise of the Cretaceous world. Yet, in the Jurassic's final chapters, the giants continued to thrive. Massive herds of Diplodocus stretched across the floodplains, their heads swaying above the trees like living cranes. Predators followed at a distance, waiting for the weak, the injured, or the young. The Earth was in motion, its skies filled with wings, its seas with motion, its land with thunder. Everywhere, the rhythm of life pulsed in perfect balance: creation, destruction, rebirth. Forests grew, burned, and grew again. Rivers shifted course. Volcanoes destroyed and fertilized. Even mass extinctions were part of that rhythm, paving the way for new beginnings. The Jurassic Age was not merely a time of monsters, it was a time of harmony. Every creature, from the smallest insect to the towering Brachiosaurus, played a part in the orchestra of life. The air was thick with the scent of vegetation, the ground trembled under colossal footsteps, and the distant calls of pterosaurs echoed through the humid sky. This was Earth at its most alive, a planet of giants, a paradise of abundance, a masterpiece of evolution's endless creativity. But, as with all ages before it, the seeds of change were already buried within the soil. New continents were rising, climates were shifting, and the balance that had held for millions of years was beginning to tilt once again. Soon, the Age of Giants would evolve into something even more complex. An age of color, diversity, and power. An age when dinosaurs would not just rule the world, but redefine it. The Jurassic had given birth to giants. The Cretaceous would make them legends. The skies above the Jurassic world shimmered with life. What had once been the domain of only clouds and storms now belonged to creatures that had conquered the air in ways evolution had never attempted before. Long before birds ever took wing, another group of reptiles had already claimed the heavens, the pterosaurs. They were the first true masters of flight, and their reign over the skies would last for more than 150 million years. They were as much a part of the dinosaur age as the giants below. Yet their story unfolded in a world all their own, high above the forests and plains. In the earliest days, during the late Triassic, pterosaurs were small and delicate. Their bones were hollow, their wings fragile but strong, made of thin membranes of skin stretched along an elongated fourth finger. Their wings were both aerodynamic and flexible, capable of subtle, precise control in the air. They hunted insects and small prey, gliding over rivers and lagoons in graceful silence. But as the world grew greener and richer, so too did they. By the height of the Jurassic, the skies had become a kingdom of diversity filled with predators, scavengers, and fish hunters that rivaled the complexity of life on land. Dimorphodon, one of the early Jurassic flyers, soared along coastal cliffs, its short wings and large head built for agile bursts of speed. It hunted fish and small reptiles, using its sharp teeth to grip slippery prey. Above the inland forests, Rhamphorhynchus glided effortlessly, its long tail ending in a diamond-shaped vein that acted as a rudder, allowing it to twist and turn through the air with remarkable precision. Their movements were silent, elegant, and exact, a perfect balance of biology and physics that no creature before them had achieved. Their world was boundless. They nested along cliff edges, built colonies on rocky islands, and hunted over tropical lagoons. Beneath them, dinosaurs ruled the earth, but above, the pterosaurs were untouchable. From the moment they leapt into the air, gravity became their ally, not their enemy. As the Jurassic continued, some pterosaurs grew to unimaginable sizes. The oxygen-rich atmosphere of the time allowed for vast wingspans and lightweight skeletons. Species like Pterodostro developed long, comb-like teeth for filtering plankton from the water, behaving much like modern flamingos. Others became aerial hunters, using speed and sharp eyesight to catch prey mid-flight. Their beaks, their wings, and even their crests evolved into every possible form the sky could support. Evolution, it seemed, was painting masterpieces in motion. The skies were not just pathways for travel, they were battlegrounds, theaters of survival. Storms could rise without warning, and volcanic eruptions filled the air with ash and heat. The pterosaurs adapted to it all. Their wings, constantly renewed with strong muscle fibers, were built for endurance. Their eyes, larger than most land animals, could detect movement from great distances, and their hollow bones, though fragile-looking, were strengthened by intricate internal supports, combining lightness and durability. As the continents drifted farther apart, new climates emerged, coastlines expanded, creating endless habitats for fish-eating pterosaurs. Inland, the first true birds were beginning to appear small, feathered descendants of theropod dinosaurs, still awkward in flight compared to their reptilian counterparts. The two lineages shared the skies for millions of years, often hunting in the same regions, competing for food and nesting grounds. The emergence of birds was one of evolution's boldest experiments. Their feathers, originally used for insulation or display, had become wings. Archaeopteryx, found in the limestone of Germany, stood as a symbol of transition. It had teeth, claws, and a long, bony tail, clear signs of its dinosaur heritage. But it also had flight feathers, hollow bones, and the beginnings of a bird's wishbone. It could glide, perhaps even flap in short bursts, marking the first true step toward modern avian flight. While the birds learned to fly in the forests, the pterosaurs continued to dominate the open skies. They grew even larger and more specialized. By the time the Cretaceous period began, around 145 million years ago, their diversity had reached its peak. Some species developed huge head crests, bright, colorful displays used for courtship or communication. Others evolved to skim the ocean's surface, dipping their beaks into the water as they flew, snatching fish in mid-motion. One of the greatest of them all would come much later, Quetzalcoatlus. With a wingspan that could reach over 12 meters larger than a small airplane, it was one of the biggest flying creatures that ever lived. Its long, narrow beak and powerful wings allowed it to soar for hours, gliding on thermal winds over the inland seas of North America. Despite its massive size, it could take off using all four limbs, launching itself skyward with explosive power. Once airborne, it was untouchable, gliding across continents in search of food. These immense flyers were not alone. Smaller species filled the skies too, anurognathids with wide mouths for catching insects, Nyctosaurus with bizarre sail-like crests, and pteranodons that patrolled the coastlines in huge colonies. The air was alive with motion, sound, and color. Feathers shimmered, wings cut through the wind, and calls echoed over the waves. Beneath them, the dinosaurs continued to evolve. Herds of triceratops grazed across plains, hadrosaurs honked in communication, and tyrannosaurs stalked the shadows. But none of them could reach the pterosaurs in their element. They were the true rulers of the sky, creatures so perfectly adapted that they defied the very limits of what life could do. Their mastery of flight was not only a biological triumph, but a glimpse into evolution's endless creativity. Nature had taken the same basic blueprint, bone, muscle, membrane, and reshaped it into countless variations. Every wing beat was a reflection of millions of years of adaptation. They were artists of the wind, each species a different brushstroke in the sky's living canvas. But even for the rulers of the sky, time was running short. Deep within the earth, changes were brewing once again. Tectonic plates shifted violently, creating new mountain ranges and volcanic chains. The climate began to fluctuate, temperatures cooling and sea levels falling. Vast inland seas started to drain, reducing the coastal habitats that many pterosaurs relied on. Competition from birds grew fierce. While pterosaurs remained dominant in open skies, the smaller, more agile birds began to outcompete them in forests and nearshore environments. Birds could lay hard-shelled eggs, lighter and less fragile than those of pterosaurs. They nested in trees, protected from floods and predators. And with their feathers, they could adapt to colder climates as the world began to change. The pterosaurs fought to endure. Some evolved shorter wings for maneuverability, others became specialized fishers or scavengers. But evolution is unforgiving when the world shifts too quickly. By the late Cretaceous, only the largest pterosaurs remained, soaring across shrinking coastlines under skies that were beginning to darken with dust. Their end would come as swiftly as their rise. 66 million years ago, a single asteroid would strike the Earth, ending the age of dinosaurs and the reign of the pterosaurs with it. Yet before that cataclysm, for over 100 million years, they had ruled the air with unmatched grace. Today, their legacy lives on in the wings of birds, their last descendants, the only flyers to survive the great extinction. Every feathered flight, every wing that catches the wind, is a whisper of those ancient rulers of the sky. The pterosaurs taught life that the air could be conquered, that the sky was not a limit, but a new frontier. They were the poets of the wind, the architects of motion. And for millions of years, they painted the heavens with their flight. The sky that we look upon today was once theirs, filled with creatures that defied gravity, not just with strength, but with beauty. And though the winds have changed, and their bones now rest in stone, the memory of their flight still lingers in every bird, in every breeze, and in the endless open sky. The oceans of the Mesozoic era were vast, mysterious, and filled with creatures unlike anything that swam before or since. While the land belonged to the dinosaurs and the skies to the pterosaurs, the seas were ruled by a different kind of empire, an empire of marine reptiles, colossal predators, and ancient survivors that transformed the oceans into a world of giants. From the shallow lagoons to the deepest trenches, these waters pulsed with life, movement, and danger. After the Permian extinction had nearly sterilized the oceans, it took millions of years for life to recover. By the time the Triassic gave way to the Jurassic, the seas had become alive again, filled with coral reefs, ammonites, and new kinds of fish. But at the top of this new marine hierarchy rose the reptiles, creatures that had returned to the water after their ancestors had conquered land. These were not dinosaurs, though they shared the same world and often the same prey. They were something else, streamlined, powerful, and perfectly adapted to a life beneath the waves. The first of these oceanic titans were the ichthyosaurs, sleek and fast like modern dolphins, but born from reptilian ancestors. They appeared soon after the Triassic extinction, small and slender at first, but quickly evolved into apex predators. By the early Jurassic, species like Ophthalmosaurus and Temnodontosaurus dominated the seas. They could reach lengths of up to 12 meters, with enormous eyes, nearly the size of dinner plates, perfect for hunting in the dim, murky depths. Their streamlined bodies and powerful tails allowed them to move with incredible speed, chasing down fish, squid, and even smaller marine reptiles. Ichthyosaurs gave birth to live young, an extraordinary adaptation for life in the open sea. Some fossils show mothers dying mid-birth, their tiny offspring fossilized between their ribs, a silent testimony to evolution's brilliance and brutality. Unlike their land-dwelling cousins, these creatures never needed to return to shore. They were true citizens of the ocean, living, hunting, and dying in the water. As the Jurassic world matured, new predators rose to challenge their dominance. Plesiosaurs appeared long-necked, graceful swimmers with bodies built for stability rather than speed. Their four paddle-like flippers moved in elegant, synchronized strokes, like wings underwater. Some, like Elasmosaurus, developed absurdly long necks, stretching up to 7 meters, while others, like Pliosaurus, evolved into short-necked giants with enormous skulls and jaws capable of crushing anything they caught. Together, these creatures formed a balance of power in the seas, each one a specialist in its domain. The oceans were no less vibrant than the forests on land. Coral reefs flourished, teeming with ammonites, belemnites, and early crustaceans. Giant turtles swam among them, feeding on seaweed and jellyfish. Schools of fish shimmered beneath the sunlight, scattering like silver storms when predators approached. Every reef, every trench, every current carried life in dazzling variety. And then, during the Cretaceous, came the mosasaurs. They were the ultimate marine hunters, descendants of land-dwelling lizards that had returned to the sea and conquered it completely. Stretching over 15 meters long, their bodies were serpentine yet muscular, their tails built for powerful propulsion, their jaws were lined with conical, blade-like teeth designed to grip and tear. They hunted fish, squid, turtles, and even other mosasaurs. Some species, like Tylosaurus, grew longer than a school bus, with skulls the size of a grown man. Their reign was swift but absolute. Within a few million years, mosasaurs became the apex predators of the late Cretaceous seas, spreading across every ocean. They were the ocean's tyrannosaurs, ruling with precision and ferocity. Fossils show bite marks from territorial battles, with massive jaws clashing beneath the waves in a struggle for dominance. No creature was safe in their presence when a mosasaur hunted. The water itself seemed to tremble. Beneath them, another world thrived. Giant ammonites, relatives of modern squids, grew shells over 2 meters wide. Their coiled homes shimmered with iridescent colors, drifting slowly through the water like spiraled planets. They were both prey and predator, part of the endless cycle of life that pulsed through the oceans. Smaller marine reptiles hunted them, only to fall prey to larger predators in turn. The seas of the Cretaceous were also home to one of the greatest evolutionary experiments, marine crocodiles. Unlike their freshwater relatives, these reptiles adapted to saltwater life, developing streamlined bodies and paddle-like limbs. Species like Metriorhynchus and Dacosaurus became efficient hunters, filling the gaps left by declining ichthyosaurs. Their jaws were razor-sharp, their senses tuned to movement and vibration. They were the stealth assassins of the deep. But even amid all this ferocity, the oceans were breathtakingly beautiful. Sunlight pierced the surface, filtering through the water in golden beams. Vast fields of coral glowed in every shade of red and blue. Jellyfish drifted like living lanterns, their tendrils glowing faintly in the dark. At night, the sea sparkled with bioluminescent plankton, lighting the waves with ghostly blue fire. It was a world of predators and poetry, chaos and creation existing side by side. For millions of years, this balance endured. Ichthyosaurs eventually vanished, replaced by newer species better suited to changing seas. Plesiosaurs diversified into dozens of forms, from gentle filter feeders to fierce hunters. Mosasaurs spread across every corner of the globe, thriving even as volcanic eruptions and shifting continents changed the shape of the Earth. But as the late Cretaceous drew toward its end, the oceans began to show signs of strain. Tectonic activity released immense quantities of carbon dioxide, warming the planet and acidifying the waters. Coral reefs began to die, and oxygen levels in the deep sea dropped dangerously low. Plankton populations fluctuated wildly, breaking the foundation of the marine food chain. Life struggled to adapt to these invisible killers. Then came the final blow, the same asteroid that would end the dinosaurs' reign on land when it struck the Yucatan Peninsula. The impact vaporized oceans and sent tsunamis racing around the world. Waves hundreds of meters high crashed against every coastline. Clouds of dust and sulfur choked the atmosphere, blocking sunlight for months. Photosynthesis stopped. Plankton died, and with them, the base of the marine ecosystem, the oceans, fell silent. The great mosasaurs, the plesiosaurs, the ammonites, all gone within a geological heartbeat. Even many fish and coral species disappeared. It was the end of the marine giants, a curtain falling over one of evolution's most extraordinary acts. But the ocean, like the earth itself, never stays empty for long. In the darkness that followed, small survivors endured. Sharks, ancient and adaptable, continued to hunt. Tiny plankton reappeared when sunlight returned, rebuilding the web of life, molecule by molecule. Within a few million years, new forms of fish dominated the seas, and mammals, those small, humble survivors of the Cretaceous forests, would one day return to the ocean as whales and dolphins, claiming the watery empire once ruled by reptiles. The story of the Mesozoic oceans is not merely about monsters. It is about transformation. The creatures that ruled those waters were more than predators. They were innovators. They taught evolution how to fly through water as birds do through air. They reshaped the marine world, building ecosystems that would endure long after they were gone. Today, when we look into the deep blue, we are seeing their legacy. Every sleek shark, every swift dolphin, every sea turtle gliding through the current carries echoes of those ancient forms. The patterns of movement, the curves of fins, even the rhythms of the tides, each holds a memory of the oceans that once roared beneath the rule of the reptiles. The Mesozoic seas were not silent. They were symphonies of motion, colour, and life. They were proof that the ocean, no matter how often destroyed, always finds a way to rise again, different, stronger, more wondrous than before. And as the waves crash against the shore today, the ghosts of those ancient oceans still whisper through them the songs of ichthyosaurs, the glide of plesiosaurs, the thunderous pursuit of mosasaurs. Their world is gone, but its rhythm still flows in the water that circles our planet, in the tides that pull our shores, and in the life that swims beneath. The oceans, remember, they always do. The late Jurassic sun rose over a world alive with thunder. Vast plains rippled with herds of plant-eating giants, their silhouettes dark against the steaming horizon. Forests swayed under the weight of giants feeding on the treetops, and the air trembled with deep, distant calls. This was the age when predators grew bolder, larger, and deadlier than anything before them. The world had entered an era defined by dominance, where evolution sharpened its teeth and forged the carnivorous titans, the apex hunters of the ancient earth. Millions of years of competition had refined them into perfection. Each species, from the nimble pack hunters to the solitary giants, had evolved with deadly precision. This was no longer a world ruled only by strength. It was ruled by intelligence, agility, and efficiency. Every predator was an artist of survival, sculpted by the relentless pressure of time. The ancestors of these killers had emerged long before, small and fast creatures darting through the shadows of the Triassic forests. They relied on speed and cunning rather than brute force. But as the Jurassic progressed, size became a new advantage. The prey were now immense sauropods, the length of trains, stegosaurs armoured in bone and spikes, and ornithopods that could sprint across open plains. To hunt them, predators had to evolve not just muscle, but strategy. One of the first of these great hunters was Allosaurus, the lion of the Jurassic. Standing over 9 meters long, with jaws lined in serrated teeth, and arms tipped with 3 curved claws, it dominated the ancient ecosystems of North America and Europe. Its skull, large yet lightweight, allowed for a powerful bite, and its vision was sharp enough to detect the slightest movement across the plains. But what made Allosaurus truly remarkable was how it hunted, not with reckless rage, but with patience and precision. Fossil evidence suggests that Allosaurus may have hunted in groups, working together to bring down prey far larger than any single predator could manage alone. Packs of these theropods would have surrounded a sauropod herd, isolating the weak or the young. Their attacks were swift and coordinated slashes at the legs, bites at the neck, and powerful kicks to destabilize their target. When the kill was made, the ground itself must have trembled under the weight of feeding giants. These creatures were built for endurance. Their tails, long and muscular, balanced their weight as they ran. Their lungs, like those of modern birds, allowed continuous airflow, giving them the stamina to chase and fight for long periods. Each movement was a perfect blend of power and balance, a living machine built for the art of predation. But Allosaurus was only one chapter in the story. Across the continents, evolution was conducting parallel experiments. In Africa, the monstrous Torvosaurus hunted the floodplains, a close relative of Allosaurus but even larger, its jaws capable of crushing bone. In China, the Tyrannosaurus stalked humid forests, its prey ranging from small dinosaurs to the young of long-necked giants. In the southern hemisphere, massive predators like Megalosaurus and Cryolophosaurus ruled the ancient lands that would one day become Antarctica. Each ecosystem had its own tyrant, adapted to its unique climate and prey. The rise of carnivorous titans was not limited to the land. In the oceans, pliosaurs, short-necked cousins of the plesiosaurs, had evolved into the apex hunters of the deep. Their jaws were lined with dagger-like teeth, and their bites were strong enough to crush the skull of a dolphin. They were the marine equivalents of Allosaurus, gliding through the water with terrifying grace, striking with the precision of lightning. As the Jurassic world matured, the arms race between predator and prey reached new heights. Herbivores developed new defenses, thicker armor, heavier tails, and horns. Stegosaurs, for example, evolved tail spikes, lethal weapons known as the thagomizer, to fend off attacks. One swing from a Stegosaurus's tail could pierce the ribcage of an Allosaurus, as fossil injuries suggest. Predators, in turn, adapted to counter these defenses. Their intelligence sharpened, their attacks grew more strategic, and their senses keener. It was a balance of terror and survival, an endless dance between hunter and hunted. As the Jurassic drew to a close, the continents continued their slow drift apart. This isolation triggered a new wave of evolution. In the northern lands, where climates grew warmer and forests denser, smaller, faster predators emerged. One of them, Colarus, was an early sign of a coming revolution. Its bones were hollow, its body light, and its movements quick and precise. It hunted in packs, relying on speed rather than size. In the southern continents, however, the giants continued to grow. As the Cretaceous dawned, new predators emerged, creatures that would redefine what it meant to be a hunter. The early Cretaceous saw the rise of Spinosaurus, a massive river-dwelling predator unlike any other. With its sail-like spine, elongated jaws, and conical teeth, it hunted fish in the swamps and deltas of North Africa. At over 15 meters long, It rivaled even the largest land carnivores. Its legs were shorter and its body more adapted to water, suggesting that it was as comfortable swimming as it was walking on land. Spinosaurus was evolution's amphibious masterpiece, a predator that blurred the boundary between sea and shore. In other parts of the world, predators took different paths. Carcharodontosaurus, named for its shark-like teeth, evolved in Africa as well, growing nearly as large as Spinosaurus. It was the terror of the plains, capable of taking down the largest sauropods. Its skull alone measured over 5 feet in length, and its serrated teeth were designed to tear through flesh in great slabs. Meanwhile, in South America, the Giganotosaurus arose, another colossal carnivore, rivaling even the famous tyrannosaurs that would come later. The ecosystems of the Cretaceous were violent and alive. Herds of massive plant-eaters, like iguanodons and titanosaurs, moved across the landscape in search of food, while predators stalked from the shadows, following their migrations. When they clashed, it was chaos, giant bodies colliding, teeth and claws rending, blood soaking the soil. It was brutal, but it was balance. Predators shaped evolution itself. By preying on the weak, they strengthened the gene pool of their prey. Every chase, every kill, every escape was a lesson written into DNA, ensuring that only the strongest and most adaptable survived. This was how life improved itself, through struggle, through fear, through the constant test of survival. And yet, for all their savagery, these creatures were not mindless killers. Their movements were calculated, their instincts refined. Fossils show evidence of healed injuries, suggesting that some species cared for wounded members of their groups. Tracks preserved in ancient mud hint at pack behavior, coordinated movement, and social dynamics. Even the greatest hunters were not just predators. They were communities, bound by instinct, survival, and perhaps something we might call cooperation. As the Cretaceous world continued to evolve, one lineage of predators began to rise above all others: the tyrannosaurs. Their ancestors were small and fast, but over millions of years they grew into towering hunters with massive jaws and bone-crushing bites. By the late Cretaceous, the Earth would see the rise of Tyrannosaurus rex, the last and greatest of the carnivorous titans. But before the rex ruled, the world belonged to many others, each one a product of its own time, each one a masterpiece of adaptation. From the sail-backed hunters of the swamps to the fleet-footed killers of the plains, every predator told a part of the same story: the relentless evolution of power. The reign of the carnivorous titans was a golden age of predation, unmatched in its scale and complexity. They were the balance keepers of the ancient world, ensuring that life remained strong through death. Beneath their claws and teeth, the planet's ecosystems thrived in perfect harmony, a brutal, beautiful dance of survival. When the sun set over the Jurassic plains, the cries of these predators echoed for miles, reverberating through the canyons and forests. It was the sound of dominance, of life in its most primal form. And though they would one day fall, their legacy would never fade. The birds that soar above us today, the predators that stalk our modern forests, all are distant echoes of these ancient hunters. For as long as there is life, there will always be the hunter and the hunted. And the story of the carnivorous titans, the rulers of tooth and claw, will forever remind us that strength alone is never enough. It is adaptation, intelligence, and will that determine who rules the earth. They came from the shadows of extinction and rose to dominate the world. They defined the power of evolution itself. And even in their silence, the earth still remembers their roar. The Middle Jurassic had given rise to power. But the Late Jurassic, the golden heart of the dinosaur age, was a spectacle beyond imagination. The continents were alive with motion, storms, and the footsteps of titans. This was a world built for giants, a living planet of endless forests, roaring herds, and predators that ruled with precision and instinct. Evolution had perfected its art, and the earth itself seemed to pulse with life. The air was thick, humid, and rich with oxygen. Volcanic ridges steamed in the distance, feeding vast jungles with mineral ash. Rivers wound through fern-filled valleys, swollen with rainfall from constant tropical storms. Above them, dragonflies the size of hawks darted through the mist, and herds of long-necked sauropods moved like slow oceans of flesh through the forests. This was the world of Jurassic giants, a planet sculpted by life on a scale the modern world can hardly imagine. The land masses of this time were still fragments of the old Panjia, breaking apart but not yet scattered. North America, Africa, and Europe were connected by shallow seas and humid corridors of jungle. These connections allowed life to spread freely, mixing bloodlines and accelerating evolution. Herds of Brachiosaurus, Diplodocus, and Apatosaurus roamed across continents that no longer exist as we know them. Each giant was a miracle of biology. Brachiosaurus, one of the tallest creatures ever to live, could stretch its neck high above the canopy, plucking leaves from trees as tall as modern skyscrapers. Its heart, weighing nearly half a ton, pumped blood up that long neck with astonishing force, maintaining pressure strong enough to sustain its brain high above its body. To stand beneath one would be to stand under a moving mountain. Nearby, Diplodocus herds grazed the lower branches, sweeping their long, whip-like tails in defense against predators. Their necks, lighter and more flexible than Brachiosaurus, allowed them to feed efficiently across wide areas. When they moved together, their footsteps created rhythms that shook the ground, hundreds of tons of living matter in perfect motion. Their droppings, enormous in quantity, fertilized the forests, ensuring that new plants always grew to feed them again. These herds were not just animals. They were the engines of the Jurassic ecosystem, keeping the cycle of life turning. But even the giants faced danger. Lurking at the edges of their world was Allosaurus, the undisputed apex predator of the Jurassic. Built for agility and endurance, it hunted with intelligence, using ambush and teamwork to take down prey many times its size. Fossilized trackways suggest that allosaurs sometimes worked in loose groups, stalking and harassing their targets until exhaustion took hold. Then, in a flash of violence, they would strike jaws clamping onto flesh, claws tearing through muscle, ending the life of a creature that had stood for a century. The balance between predator and prey was delicate, but it worked. Every fallen giant fed scavengers, insects, and the soil itself. From death came life. Vultures of the time, small, feathered dinosaurs, picked clean the bones, spreading seeds in their droppings and helping forests to regrow. Even decay was part of the symphony. Throughout the Jurassic world, the variety of life was staggering. In North America, herds of Camarasaurus fed in river valleys. In Africa, Giraffatitan, a cousin of Brachiosaurus, towered over floodplains that shimmered in the heat. In Europe, smaller sauropods lived in island forests, where limited space forced them to remain small, a rare glimpse of evolution in miniature. The oceans that separated these lands teemed with ichthyosaurs and plesiosaurs, hunting among coral reefs and ammonite swarms. As the continents shifted, climates changed. Monsoons drenched entire regions for months at a time, then gave way to droughts that baked the land until rivers ran dry. Migration became essential. Herds moved hundreds of miles in search of food and water, following ancient paths carved by generations before them. Predators followed close behind. It was a brutal world, but one of order, the balance of life, maintained through motion, struggle, and renewal. In the skies, the pterosaurs soared, creatures like Pterodactylus and Rhamphorhynchus, gliding effortlessly over coastlines and lakes. They nested in cliffs and hunted fish, their wings shimmering in the humid air. Their cries echoed through canyons as thunder rolled in the distance. They were the lords of the wind, sharing the skies with early feathered dinosaurs that were just beginning to test the limits of flight. Beneath their wings, forests stretched as far as the eye could see, towering conifers, cycads, and ferns creating dense jungles alive with sound. Insects hummed in the heat. Lizards darted across roots, slick with dew. Streams carved silver paths through the greenery. It was a world of abundance and rhythm, where every living thing played its part. As day gave way to night, the air cooled, and the calls of nocturnal hunters filled the darkness. Small predators, early relatives of raptors, prowled in the shadows, their eyes reflecting the moonlight. Mammals, still tiny and furtive, emerged from burrows to feed on insects and eggs. Though insignificant compared to the giants above, these small survivors were the seeds of the future evolution's quiet insurance against catastrophe. Storms were frequent, violent, and spectacular. Lightning forked across the sky, illuminating herds of sauropods silhouetted against the rain. Volcanoes erupted on the horizon, spilling fire into the dark. Ash clouds drifted across the world, fertilizing the soil but darkening the sun. For weeks, the planet would cool, then warm again, creating cycles of destruction and renewal. In the wake of such chaos, the Earth always healed. Forests regrew faster than they burned. Rivers cut new channels through volcanic plains. Lakes filled with rainwater and bloomed with life once more. Nature's resilience was absolute. The dinosaurs were not merely inhabitants of this world, they were part of its heartbeat. Every storm, every fire, every birth and death was woven into the grand tapestry of life. By the end of the Jurassic, the world had reached a balance of unimaginable complexity. Ecosystems spanned continents. Climate stabilized under a global greenhouse effect. Oxygen levels were high, and plant life flourished in every corner of the earth. The air smelled of resin and rain. Herds moved in slow motion across plains that glowed gold under the setting sun. Predators roared from distant ridges. Flocks of pterosaurs painted the skies in shifting patterns. It was a masterpiece of evolution, a planet at the height of its biological creativity. But change, as always, was waiting beneath the surface. Tectonic plates continued to drift, pulling continents apart and reshaping coastlines. Volcanic gases began to alter the atmosphere. Sea levels rose and fell unpredictably, creating new swamps and drying others. Small disruptions rippled through ecosystems. Invisible at first, but destined to grow. The Jurassic world, for all its splendor, was not eternal. Soon, new forms would evolve, new predators would rise, and the balance that had endured for millions of years would tilt once again. Yet for this brief moment in deep time, Earth was alive in its purest form. From the smallest insect to the mightiest sauropod, every creature was part of a living planet in perfect harmony. If one could stand in that world beneath the trees, beside the rivers, beneath the shadow of a brachiosaurus feeding high above, the sound would be overwhelming. The earth would vibrate underfoot. The air would shimmer with heat and movement. It would be a reminder that the world we know today, with its cities and silence, is only a faint echo of what once was. The age of Jurassic giants was more than an era. It was the Earth's heartbeat at full strength, thunder in motion, life at its grandest scale. And though the giants would one day vanish, their legacy would never fade. They built the soil we stand on, the landscapes we see, and the cycles of life that still shape our planet. The world of Jurassic giants was not just the age of dinosaurs. It was the age when Earth itself was alive. The Cretaceous world dawned in brilliance. It was a planet transformed, warmer, greener, and more dynamic than ever before. The breakup of Panjia was nearly complete, and the continents had drifted far enough apart to form new oceans and climates. The air shimmered with humidity, the forests stretched endlessly, and life filled every possible space. The dinosaurs had survived every challenge thrown at them, and now they stood at their peak, diverse, adaptable, and magnificent. This was their golden age, the final and most extraordinary chapter in their reign. The Cretaceous period began around 145 million years ago and would last for nearly 80 million years, a span so vast that it witnessed the rise and fall of entire species, continents, and climates. The Jurassic world had been lush and humid, but the Cretaceous took that fertility and expanded it across the globe. Flowering plants appeared for the first time, changing the very rhythm of life. Their colours and scents filled the air, attracting insects that evolved alongside them, creating a new web of pollination that reshaped ecosystems. The planet bloomed, literally, and the dinosaurs thrived in this vibrant new world. Across the continents, evolution painted life in endless forms. In North America, vast inland seas divided the land into two halves. To the east lay humid swamps and forests, to the west open plains and deserts. These seas teemed with marine reptiles, ammonites, and early sharks, while the land was ruled by an astonishing diversity of dinosaurs. Herds of duck-billed hadrosaurs grazed the plains, their crests and calls echoing across the horizon. Armored ankylosaurs moved through the underbrush like tanks, their tails armed with massive clubs that could shatter bone. Towering ceratopsians, such as Triceratops and Styracosaurus, grazed among ferns, their frills and horns serving both for defense and display. But among them, one predator rose above all others: Tyrannosaurus rex, the apex of terrestrial evolution. It stood over 4 meters tall at the hips and stretched more than 12 meters from snout to tail. Its jaws could crush through bone, and its bite force was unmatched by any land predator in history. Yet T-Rex was not a mindless killer. It was intelligent, observant, and strategic. Its forward-facing eyes provided depth perception. Its nose was incredibly sensitive, and its hearing was fine-tuned to the low rumbles of distant movement. It was the perfect hunter for the Cretaceous world, a living engine of muscle and purpose. But the T-Rex was not alone in its rule. Across the globe, other apex predators evolved, each suited to its environment. In South America, Giganotosaurus and Mapusaurus hunted the giant sauropods of the southern plains. In Africa, Carcharodontosaurus prowled the river valleys, a massive hunter rivaling the tyrant lizards of the north. In the swamps of North Africa, Spinosaurus dominated the waterways, an amphibious killer with a sail rising from its back and jaws built for catching fish. It was the largest known carnivore of its time, part hunter, part swimmer, an evolutionary experiment that blurred the line between land and sea. Beneath the open skies, the earth pulsed with sound. Herds moved in constant migration, their movements shaping the landscape. Rivers turned muddy with footprints. Forests trembled as sauropods passed through, and volcanoes lit the horizon with distant fire. The Cretaceous was a world of motion and colour. The rise of flowering plants had transformed the planet in more ways than one. For the first time, landscapes exploded with hues, reds, yellows, purples, and whites. Fruit-bearing plants emerged, offering new food sources for herbivores. The air was filled with the buzzing of insects, ancestors of bees, wasps, and butterflies. This new complexity gave rise to even greater ecological diversity. Small dinosaurs evolved finer senses, better vision, and more complex behavior to navigate these intricate environments. Some dinosaurs took to the skies completely. Small feathered theropods, descendants of earlier predators, had become true birds. Their feathers had evolved beyond insulation and display. Now they were tools for powered flight. Early birds like Confuciusornis and Enantiornithines soared over the forests of Asia, nesting in trees and gliding across lakes. Their songs filled the air where once only reptilian cries had echoed. The sky, once ruled by pterosaurs alone, had now become shared territory. The pterosaurs themselves evolved in spectacular ways during the Cretaceous. Some grew to unbelievable sizes, giants like Quetzalcoatlus, with wingspans exceeding 12 meters, glided effortlessly across continents, feeding on fish and small animals. Others adapted to specialized niches, coastal hunters, insect catchers, and fruit eaters. They filled the skies with variety, their wings tracing ancient patterns over a changing world. In the oceans, the rule of the reptiles continued. Mosasaurs, massive serpentine predators, dominated the seas. They hunted fish, squid, and even each other, their long jaws lined with sharp teeth. Plesiosaurs and Elasmosaurus glided through the water with 4 flippers, their long necks twisting elegantly to snatch prey. Coral reefs teemed with ammonites, fish, and crustaceans. It was a world as full and fierce beneath the waves as it was above them. And yet, even amid the abundance, subtle changes had begun. Volcanoes, in what is now India, spewed lava for centuries, releasing carbon dioxide and sulfur into the atmosphere. The planet's temperature fluctuated, sea levels rose and fell, and ecosystems shifted in response. New species adapted quickly, but the signs of instability were there. Deep in the earth, change was brewing, and the perfect balance of the Cretaceous world was beginning to tilt. Still, for tens of millions of years, life flourished. The Cretaceous period saw some of the most advanced and intelligent dinosaur behavior yet. Many species lived in herds or family groups, protecting their young and cooperating for survival. Fossilized nesting grounds show evidence of parental care, dinosaurs guarding eggs, feeding hatchlings, and even migrating seasonally to return to familiar nesting sites. This was no longer the primitive world of the early Triassic. This was a mature, interconnected planet. As time went on, climates became more extreme. Polar regions, once mild, began to experience seasonal darkness and cold. Astonishingly, dinosaurs adapted even there. Fossils from Antarctica and Alaska reveal species that lived in low light, enduring long winters and short, intense summers. Their bodies evolved efficient metabolisms, and some likely grew feathers for insulation. The age of dinosaurs had reached every corner of the globe. The sounds of the Cretaceous world must have been overwhelming, the deep bellows of sauropods echoing across valleys, the calls of hadrosaurs resonating through forests, the screeches of predators and the rustling of wings. Lightning storms flashed over plains, filled with life, illuminating herds and flocks in golden light. It was a world both savage and beautiful, where evolution displayed its full creativity. Toward the final stretch of the Cretaceous, around 70 million years ago, the continents had nearly reached their modern positions. North America had split from Europe, and South America was drifting away from Africa. The planet was alive, but its fate was sealed. Somewhere in the depths of space, a 10-kilometer-wide asteroid had already begun its silent journey toward Earth. For now, though, the dinosaurs ruled undisturbed. In the swamps of what is now Montana, herds of triceratops grazed under red skies. In the canyons of Asia, packs of velociraptors hunted in coordination, their sickle-shaped claws gleaming. The last golden age of the dinosaurs was unfolding in full brilliance. And then, without warning, everything would change. For 180 million years, the dinosaurs had ruled. They had survived volcanic winters, shifting continents, and evolving predators. They had built ecosystems that thrived across the planet. They were nature's greatest success story. But in a single day, the skies would darken, the ground would tremble, and the age of giants would end. The Cretaceous world was a masterpiece of life, vibrant, complex, and unstoppable. It was the Earth's symphony at its loudest, its most colourful, its most alive. And as the final sunrise rose over that ancient planet, the dinosaurs, unaware of their coming fate, continued to roam, feed, and fight beneath a sky soon to fall. The golden age of the Cretaceous was both the peak and the final heartbeat of the ancient world, a world that would vanish in fire, but leave its spirit forever in the stones beneath our feet. The final day began like any other. The sun rose over a world at the height of its glory, a planet alive with colour, sound, and motion. Herds of triceratops moved slowly through the mist-covered plains, tearing ferns from the ground with beaked mouths. Hadrosaurs trumpeted across distant valleys, their calls echoing like deep horns. High above, pterosaurs glided effortlessly across a golden sky, their wings casting shifting shadows on the water below. Predators watched from the forests, waiting for the weak to stray too far from the herd. It was peaceful, almost timeless. There was no warning, no sign that this morning would be the last. In the darkness of space, far beyond the blue shimmer of the atmosphere, a rock 10 kilometers wide hurtled toward the planet. It had been traveling for millions of years, a silent, aimless wanderer, born from the debris of a broken world, drawn by gravity. It now moved faster than any bullet, glowing with the heat of its descent. It was destiny-made stone. As it entered the upper atmosphere, it burned brighter than the sun. From horizon to horizon, the sky flashed white. Animals looked up, birds scattered, herds stampeded. Predators froze in confusion. And then, in a single instant, the world ended. The asteroid struck near what is now the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico, slamming into the shallow sea with unimaginable force. The energy released was equivalent to more than 1 billion nuclear bombs. In less than a heartbeat, rock and water vaporized into fire. The impact created a crater over 150 kilometers wide and sent molten debris hurtling into space. The air itself ignited. Shock waves ripped across continents, flattening forests and boiling rivers. Within minutes, tsunamis, hundreds of meters high, radiated outward, crashing against coastlines thousands of kilometers away. Entire ecosystems were obliterated. Firestorms erupted across the land as molten rock rained down, setting forests ablaze from pole to pole. The sky glowed orange and red, the entire planet wrapped in flame. Those who did not die in the initial blast faced a slower death. The debris thrown into the atmosphere blocked the sun, plunging the Earth into a darkness that lasted for months. Temperatures dropped sharply, and photosynthesis stopped. Plants withered, and herbivores starved. Without prey, the great predators soon followed. The smell of smoke and decay filled the air. Once green landscapes turned grey, and lifeless volcanic eruptions, triggered by the impact's shock, poured lava and poisonous gases into the air. Acid rain fell across continents. Even the oceans were poisoned as the pH levels shifted, and plankton, the foundation of marine life, disappeared. The sound of life faded, replaced by silence. The mighty tyrannosaurs, rulers of the north, were among the last to fall. Some scavenged on the corpses of the dying, but there was nothing left to sustain them. In the southern lands, the great sauropods, the last of the long necks, collapsed under skies of ash. The once vibrant seas, home to mosasaurs and ammonites, turned still. Even the air, once filled with the cries of pterosaurs, became silent. Only the smallest and most adaptable survived. Deep in burrows, small mammals endured the cold, feeding on roots and insects. Birds, descendants of small, feathered dinosaurs, found refuge in the seeds that survived the fires. Crocodiles, turtles, and a few hardy amphibians clung to the edges of the rivers and lakes. In this world of death, these few survivors carried the spark of life through the darkness. For months, the planet remained shrouded in night. The temperature plummeted. Ice formed at the poles and in places that had never known frost. When sunlight finally returned, it was weak and pale, filtered through a sky filled with dust. The forests were gone. The air was thin. The world had changed forever. In geological terms, the devastation was instant. In less than a year, over 75% of all species on Earth vanished. On land, no creature larger than 20 kilograms survived. The age of dinosaurs, which had lasted for more than 180 million years, ended in a geological blink. And yet, even in destruction, life found a way forward. The Earth, though wounded, still turned. Rain washed the ash from the air, and the first green shoots began to push through the grey soil. Small ferns appeared, then shrubs, then trees. Within decades, insects returned. Birds multiplied, spreading seeds and rebuilding the forests. The mammals, once tiny and timid, began to expand into the empty spaces left behind. In time, the world would recover. But it would never be the same. The dinosaurs, the masters of an age, the architects of the most diverse ecosystems the planet had ever known, were gone. Their bones would lie buried beneath the earth for millions of years, waiting for a new species to uncover them and tell their story. The crater left by the impact became a scar, a reminder written in stone. Deep beneath the sediments of the Yucatan lies the boundary between two worlds, the Cretaceous and the Paleogene, the age of reptiles and the age of mammals. That thin layer of clay, rich in iridium from the asteroid, marks the moment the old world ended and the new one began. In the silence that followed, the earth rested. The fires died, the skies cleared, and life, stubborn and unstoppable, began again. Evolution had wiped the slate clean, not out of cruelty, but necessity. Extinction is the shadow of creation, the force that opens space for something new. And from that emptiness, a new chapter would rise. Mammals would grow, adapt, and take on forms unimagined. Birds would spread to every corner of the planet, heirs to their fallen ancestors. The forests would bloom again, and the oceans would fill with new life. But for nearly 180 million years, this world had belonged to the dinosaurs, to the titans of the land, the lords of the sky, and the monsters of the deep. They had risen from the ashes of one extinction, ruled through fire and flood, and fell only when the heavens themselves turned against them. The last day of the dinosaurs was not the end of life, it was its transformation. And though the giants are gone, their spirit endures in every bird that takes flight, in every reptile that basks in the sun, and in every fossil that whispers from the stone. Their world may have ended in fire, but their story lives on, written in the bones of the earth and in the DNA of all that came after. For in every age there comes an ending, and in every ending a new beginning waits, silent beneath the dust. The fires had burned out, the storms had faded, the sky, once black with ash, began to clear. Sunlight filtered weakly through the grey haze that still hung over the planet. It touched a world unrecognizable from the one that had existed only months before. The forests were gone, the plains reduced to ash, and the great dinosaurs, once the architects of every ecosystem, had vanished. Silence stretched across the continents. This was the aftermath, the moment when life stood on the edge of oblivion. The asteroid's impact had ended an age, but it had not ended life itself. Buried beneath the ground, hidden in lakes and rivers, or surviving on scraps and roots, a few species endured. They were small, quick, and adaptable, the quiet creatures that had once lived in the shadows of giants, and in this shattered world, they became the seeds of everything that would come next. The first to recover were the plants. Even amid destruction, nature always remembers how to grow. Fern spores, carried by wind and water, began to settle across the burned landscapes. Within months, green patches appeared among the ash-delicate shoots pushing through the dead earth. Within a few years, vast fern meadows covered the continents. Scientists call this the fern spike, a brief but spectacular moment when these resilient plants reclaimed the planet. The air was still harsh. The atmosphere carried traces of sulfur and dust, and rainfall remained acidic. But slowly, the balance began to return. The carbon dioxide released by fires and volcanoes warmed the planet again, and rainfall grew steady. Rivers began to flow through blackened valleys, and where there was water, there was life. Small freshwater fish survived in isolated lakes, turtles and crocodiles. Their lineage, older than the dinosaurs themselves, endured by sheer toughness. They had survived every extinction before, and would survive this one too. Amphibians hid in burrows and damp caves, emerging when the rains returned. And among the ashes, small mammals, once timid insect eaters, began to emerge. These mammals were unremarkable at first glance, tiny, nocturnal, with sharp teeth and keen senses. But they had one advantage that would define the future versatility. They could eat almost anything. They could burrow, climb, or swim. While the great reptiles needed abundance to thrive, these small survivors could live on scarcity. In a world of ruin, adaptability was the only currency that mattered. As years turned to decades, the ferns gave way to shrubs, and the shrubs to forests. The planet healed faster than anyone could imagine. The soil, enriched by the minerals from volcanic ash and decomposed remains, became fertile again. Grasses began to evolve, forming the first true meadows. The Earth was entering a new phase, one that would favor speed, intelligence, and adaptability over size and strength. The age of mammals had begun, quietly and humbly. They diversified quickly. Some remained small and insectivorous, living in burrows and trees. Others began to grow larger, taking advantage of the open landscapes. Species with hooves appeared, grazing on the new grasses. Others developed claws and fangs, becoming the first true predators of the post-dinosaur world. Evolution, freed from the shadow of the giants, began its next great experiment. But this new age was not without its ghosts. For millions of years, the Earth still bore the scars of the impact. The crater itself, now a basin filled with rain and seawater, was a silent reminder of what had been lost. Layers of sediment preserved the story of that day in exquisite detail. The iridium-rich boundary, the ash, the fossils of creatures that had died within hours. It was as if the planet had written its own obituary, one that would be read by future minds not yet born, and those minds would one day find something remarkable. Amid the fossils of the fallen giants, they would discover traces of survival bird fossils. For while the dinosaurs of the land and sky perished, their smallest descendants, the true birds, endured. Their hollow bones, feathers, and warm-blooded metabolism gave them resilience against the cold. Their ability to fly allowed them to escape local disasters and find food in distant regions. They fed on seeds that had survived the fires, and as they spread, they carried new life with them. They were the last dinosaurs, and they still live among us today. Every songbird, every eagle, every crow is a whisper of that ancient world, a reminder that not everything died when the sky fell. Over the next few million years, the planet transformed again. Rainforests spread across the equator, and temperate forests reclaimed the north. New rivers carved through old impact debris, and the air filled with the sounds of insects and birds. The world had been empty, but now it was alive again. Mammals continued to evolve rapidly. By 10 million years after the impact, they had grown into creatures far larger than their ancestors. Herbivorous mammals roamed the grasslands in herds, while predators stalked the shadows. Early primates appeared in the trees, their hands adapted for grasping branches and their eyes forward-facing for depth perception. Life was reinventing itself, one adaptation at a time. The ecosystems of this new era were simpler at first, but they grew increasingly complex. Reptiles, though diminished, still flourished in warm regions. Crocodiles dominated rivers, snakes spread into forests, and lizards adapted to nearly every environment. The seas, too, came back to life. Coral reefs reformed, new fish species evolved, and mammals returned to the ocean in the form of early whales, distant descendants of land-dwelling hoofed creatures that had chosen to reclaim the sea. It was as if the planet had taken a deep breath after its long silence. And while life adapted and diversified, the Earth itself kept changing. The continents continued their slow drift, creating new mountain ranges and deepening ocean basins. Climate shifted, glaciers advanced and retreated, and deserts formed where seas had once been. Each change shaped evolution in new ways, guiding the rise of entirely new kinds of creatures. The age of mammals, the Cenozoic, became an era of constant reinvention. Every few million years brought a new world. Giant herbivores like the woolly mammoth and the brontosaurs appeared. Predators like saber-toothed cats evolved. Birds diversified into every possible niche. And in the shadows of forests, a new kind of creature was learning to use its hands, to think, to adapt, the first primates. But even as mammals rose, the memory of the dinosaurs never truly disappeared. Their bones, buried deep within the rock, told a story of triumph and tragedy. Their descendants, the birds, filled the sky that had once belonged to the pterosaurs. Their ecological legacy, the idea that life could dominate every niche, continued to shape evolution forever. The survivors' world was not a replacement for the dinosaurs' Earth. It was their continuation. Evolution never ends a story. It only rewrites it. The forests that grew from the ashes carried nutrients left behind by the fallen giants. The soil was thick with their remains, feeding the next generation of life. Even in death, the dinosaurs gave back to the planet that had shaped them, and so, in a strange way, they never truly left. Every living creature today, mammal, bird, reptile, fish, carries in its DNA the lessons learned in their age. The instinct to hunt, to flee, to protect, to adapt, all of it was born in the ancient world. The asteroid had ended their bodies, but not their influence. Life continued, because that is what life does. It endures, it transforms, it begins again. And as the first mammals stood upright beneath the warmth of a new sun, the Earth, though forever changed, still remembered the rhythm of the old world. The winds that brushed through the forests, the rivers that cut through the land, and the birds that sang above it all. They were the echoes of a time when giants ruled. The dinosaurs were gone, but their story was not finished. It lived on in every living thing that crawled, swam, or flew beneath the endless sky they once called home. For tens of millions of years after the sky fell, Earth remade itself. The ashes of the Cretaceous settled into layers of stone, and from them the planet rose renewed. Forests spread over continents, rivers carved valleys through new mountains, and the oceans filled again with life. But no matter how far time moved forward, the echoes of the ancient world never faded. The dinosaurs were gone. But their legacy lived on, not just in fossils, but in the very blueprint of life. Their story was written into the DNA of every creature that survived. It shaped how animals breathed, moved, and evolved. Their extinction had not been the end of the chain, it had been the turning of a page. Evolution never erases its past. It builds upon it, using what once was to create what will be. In the new age, the mammals flourished. Freed from the shadow of the giants, they diversified into every corner of the planet. The world became a living experiment, each species exploring a different way to live. Some returned to the oceans, giving rise to whales and dolphins, warm-blooded air-breathing creatures that ruled the seas just as ichthyosaurs and mosasaurs once had. Others took to the air, gliding between trees, or evolving into true flight as bats. On land, herbivores and carnivores grew into shapes that mirrored the old world, not by imitation, but by necessity. Nature repeats its best ideas. The first great grazers filled the plains, echoing the herds of hadrosaurs. Predators evolved sleek bodies and powerful limbs, as efficient in their hunts as the raptors of the Cretaceous. Elephants replaced the sauropods as the new engineers of the landscape, reshaping forests and grasslands wherever they roamed. In every continent, new forms took the stage, but their roles were familiar, the same eternal balance of hunter and prey, growth and decay. The birds, too, carried forward the torch of their ancestors. They inherited the skies from the pterosaurs, but their flight was different, precise, musical, full of intention. From the silent wings of owls to the sweeping arcs of eagles, each species was a living tribute to the creatures that once ruled the air. Their bones were light but strong. Their lungs, the same advanced system that had once powered the dinosaurs' immense bodies. Every beat of their wings was a whisper from the past. Beneath their song, the planet itself changed. Mountains rose, ice caps formed, and new climates emerged. Yet, through it all, life adapted. The flexibility that had once allowed dinosaurs to thrive in deserts and forests alike now belonged to their descendants. The same survival instinct that had carried them through volcanic winters now lived in mammals and birds, written into the very chemistry of existence. And as the ages passed, the shapes of life began to look strangely familiar. Crocodiles still lurked in rivers, barely changed since the days they watched dinosaurs drink. Turtles still swam in seas once haunted by plesiosaurs. Dragonflies still skimmed over ponds just as they had when Allosaurus ruled the land. Time moved, but the design of life remained loyal to its origins. Fossils, preserved in stone, became the Earth's memory. Each layer of rock was a page in a book, millions of years long, and the bones within it told the story of creation, dominance, and loss. When future beings, curious, intelligent, and self-aware, would one day walk the earth, they would read those pages and see themselves reflected in them. They would understand that they, too, were part of this lineage. Those beings would be humans, small primates, born from the evolutionary spark that the dinosaurs' extinction had made possible. Their rise was slow, humble, and unremarkable at first. Early mammals climbed trees, walked plains, and hunted in packs, their brains slowly growing more complex. The world they inherited was stable, fertile, and full of opportunity, and from that opportunity, intelligence bloomed. Millions of years later, when humans finally looked up at the night sky, they did so with eyes shaped by survival, curiosity, and wonder instincts as old as the first reptile that ever gazed toward the stars. In their search for meaning, they dug into the ground and found the bones of creatures beyond comprehension. They named them, studied them, and in doing so, rediscovered the ancient world. Every fossil they unearthed told the same truth. Life endures by changing. The earth does not cling to what was, it evolves toward what can be. The dinosaurs had not truly vanished, they had simply transformed. In the flutter of a sparrow's wing, in the fierce stare of an eagle, in the rhythm of every heartbeat on earth, the ancient world still lived. Their legacy also lay deeper in the planet itself. The carbon from their bodies, compressed over eons, became the fuels that would one day power civilization. The minerals they helped distribute through their migrations enriched the soil that would feed the future. Even the oxygen we breathe bears the signature of the ecosystems they shaped. To say that the dinosaurs disappeared is to misunderstand what extinction means. Nothing truly disappears in nature. It only changes form. The atoms that once built the armor of ankylosaurs now rest in mountains and rivers. The calcium from their bones strengthens the shells of modern creatures. Even the dust of the asteroid that ended them still falls gently to Earth, part of the cosmic cycle that connects everything. Their greatest gift, however, was perspective. They remind every living thing that dominance is fleeting and that life is not about permanence but participation. For 180 million years, they ruled the world longer than any species that came before or after. And when their time ended, the world did not mourn. It adapted. That is the lesson of the ancient world. Power is temporary, but existence is eternal. Today, when we stand in a museum and look upon the skeleton of a Tyrannosaurus rex or the wings of an Archaeopteryx, we are not just looking at death, we are looking at continuity. We are seeing our own story written in an older language, one of bone and time. The legacy of the ancient world surrounds us. It flows through the veins of every creature, breathes in every gust of wind, glimmers in every scale and feather. The world as it exists now, with its forests, mountains, oceans, and cities, was built upon the bones of those who came before. The dinosaurs shaped the earth so completely that even their absence became an act of creation. In their long reign, they proved that life could dominate every corner of the planet. In their fall, they proved that life could begin again. And in their transformation into birds, they proved that extinction is never absolute. So when a bird takes flight above you, remember that you are watching a dinosaur's descendant trace the sky its ancestors once ruled. When you breathe, know that you inhale the same air that passed through their lungs. When you walk, feel the ground shaped by their footsteps millions of years ago. Their world is gone, but it never truly ended. It lives in ours, in us, as memory, as matter, as motion. And as long as life continues to evolve, their story will continue to echo, whispering through time that nothing in nature is ever lost. It only becomes something new. The earth is quiet now. Yet beneath its calm lies a memory billions of years deep, a record of survival, loss, and renewal. Every layer of rock, every fossil, every shifting continent tells the same timeless story. Life never truly ends, it only changes. From the moment the first cells formed in the oceans to the fall of the dinosaurs and the rise of humans, the story has never stopped unfolding. Extinction is not the closing of a book, it is merely the turning of a page. After the fall of the dinosaurs, the planet was a canvas wiped clean. New species painted upon it with the same determination that had carried their ancestors through eons of struggle. Mammals grew larger, faster, and smarter. Birds diversified, bringing color and song back to the skies. Plants evolved in harmony with insects, their blooms becoming more intricate, their scents more enticing. In the ruins of destruction, nature found beauty again. The first great mammals began to dominate the forests and plains, towering herbivores, swift carnivores, and burrowing survivors. In the oceans, whales evolved from land-dwelling creatures, returning to the sea as giants of their own time. They filled the role left behind by ichthyosaurs and mosasaurs, proving that the ocean would always have its rulers on land. Predators rose and fell, from saber-toothed cats to wolves and lions. Each was a reflection of those that had come before evolution, replaying its greatest symphonies in new forms. But among all these forms of life, one lineage grew differently. It stood upright, learned to shape tools, and began to wonder about its own existence. Humans were not the strongest, nor the fastest, but they were the most curious, and curiosity is the truest power of life. In them, the story of the ancient world found its voice. They dug into the earth and found the bones of creatures long vanished. They studied the layers of stone and realized the planet was older than they had ever imagined. They discovered that they, too, were part of the same grand lineage, built from the same atoms, shaped by the same laws, born from the same dust that had once formed the dinosaurs. In their eyes, the universe began to know itself. Humanity's rise was not separate from nature, it was its continuation. The hands that carved tools were made from minerals forged in the hearts of ancient stars. The air they breathed was once exhaled by the forests of the Cretaceous. The calcium in their bones came from oceans that had long since turned to stone. Every heartbeat was a rhythm passed down through time, a pulse shared with creatures that no longer walked the earth. As civilizations grew and knowledge deepened, humans began to see patterns in the past cycles of creation and collapse, of balance and renewal. They learned that extinction was not failure, but transformation, that every end carried within it the seeds of a new beginning. They named these ages and measured them in time, but the essence of it remained beyond numbers. Life persists because it must, and yet, even now, the lesson of the dinosaurs lingers as a warning. For all their power, their dominance, and their majesty, they fell not through weakness, but through fate and change. They remind us that no species, however great, is immune to the forces of the earth. The same natural power that gave rise to life can just as easily take it away. The difference now is awareness. Humanity can understand what no creature before could, that survival is a choice, not just a reaction. We are stewards of a legacy billions of years old. Every tree we cut, every ocean we pollute, every creature we drive to extinction adds another scar to that story. But every seed we plant, every species we protect, every balance we restore, adds a new chapter of hope. The eternal story of life is not just about what survives, it is about what learns. Evolution rewards not the strongest, but the most adaptable, those who change, who listen, who evolve with the world rather than against it. The dinosaurs ruled because they adapted. They perished when they could not. Their legacy teaches us to respect the planet that made us, to understand that our time, too, is borrowed. Look closely at the world around us, the forests, the oceans, the skies, and you will see the same shapes repeated through time. A bird in flight carries the memory of a pterosaur. An elephant's slow walk echoes the rhythm of a sauropod. The hunt of a lion mirrors the chase of a tyrannosaur. Life does not invent endlessly. It refines, recycles, and remembers. And in the end, that is what makes it eternal. The story that began 400 million years ago, when the first fish crawled onto land, continues still in every breath, in every heartbeat, in every step across the soil, once trodden by giants. We are not separate from that story. We are its latest verse. The earth that shaped the dinosaurs shaped us too. The stars that watched over their reign now shine on ours. And just as they fell, one day we too will pass not as an ending, but as another transformation. New species will rise from our ashes, shaped by the choices we make today. They will inherit the world we leave behind, just as we inherited the one left by the dinosaurs. Perhaps they will look at our fossils and wonder who we were, just as we now gaze upon the bones of the giants and wonder what their world was like. They will see patterns of rise and fall, of creation and destruction, and realize that life has always been one endless, self-renewing flame. So when the winds blow across deserts once covered in ferns, when waves crash over cliffs that were once inland seas, when birds sing in the light of dawn, remember, they are singing the song of the ancient world. The dinosaurs may be gone, but the rhythm they set in motion still drives every living thing. From the first spark of life to the endless reach of evolution, their story is the planet's story, the story of endurance, of beauty, of transformation. And as long as there is breath on this earth, as long as a single creature looks up to the sky in wonder, the ancient world will never truly die. The earth remembers, the stars remember, and so do we. The ashes of the Cretaceous had long settled. From that silence, a new earth emerged, one both familiar and alien. The jungles that once trembled under the weight of dinosaurs now swayed gently under the wind, untouched by thunderous footsteps. The skies, once filled with the wings of pterosaurs, now belonged to birds, their calls echoing where the roars of giants once rolled. And across the plains, in the warmth of the early Paleogene sun, small, cautious creatures began to multiply. They were the survivors, the quiet inheritors of a broken world. This was the beginning of the age of mammals, a new chapter in the story of life. For the first time in nearly 200 million years, the Earth was free of giants. With the extinction of the dinosaurs, the balance of power had shifted. Where once there had been titans, there were now opportunities. New habitats opened, new food sources became available, and evolution began to experiment again. In the shadows of the ferns, small mammals scurried between roots and fallen logs. They had survived the darkness by hiding, feeding on insects and seeds, and now they emerged into the light. Their world was vast and empty, waiting to be filled. These first mammals were not impressive to look at. Most were the size of mice or small rabbits, but they carried something no dinosaur ever had: the potential for endless adaptation. They could regulate their body temperature, care for their young, and eat almost anything. They were nature's ultimate generalists, and that made them unstoppable. As the Paleocene epoch unfolded, just a few million years after the asteroid impact, the world transformed rapidly. Forests returned, spreading across continents. Lush tropical jungles covered North America and Europe, while fern-filled wetlands flourished near the equator. The air was heavy with moisture, and temperatures were warm across most of the planet. In these forests, mammals began to evolve into new shapes. Insect eaters grew larger, developing longer legs and sharper senses to chase prey. Some adapted for climbing trees, developing grasping limbs and flexible tails. Others became grazers, with flat teeth for chewing leaves and shoots. The first hoofed mammals appeared, precursors to modern deer and horses. With every generation, the descendants of small survivors became bolder, stronger, and more diverse. The oceans, too, saw their rebirth. That after the extinction, it took only a few million years for marine life to return to its former abundance. Fish populations exploded, and coral reefs flourished again. From the land, a new kind of creature began to venture into the waves, small hoofed mammals that hunted in shallow water. Over millions of years, these pioneers evolved into the first whales. Their legs shrank into fins, their nostrils moved to the tops of their heads, and their bodies became sleek, and hydrodynamic. Evolution had come full circle. Life was returning to the sea, where it had first begun. By the Eocene epoch, about 50 million years after the extinction, the age of mammals was in full bloom. The world was warm and wet, covered in forests from pole to pole. It was a planet of abundance, a second golden age. Mammals of all shapes and sizes roamed the earth. Herbivores grew massive. A giant rhino, like Paraceratherium, the largest land mammal to ever exist, stood nearly 6 meters tall. Its neck reached the treetops, feeding on leaves where no other mammal could. In the open plains, herds of early horses and antelope-like animals grazed endlessly. Predators evolved to match the massive flightless birds with hooked beaks hunted across grasslands, while wolf-sized carnivorous mammals stalked the forests. In the trees, small primates began to appear. Their hands and feet evolved to grasp branches. Their eyes shifted forward for depth perception, and their brains grew more complex. They formed social groups, communicated with sounds and gestures, and adapted to life high above the ground. These early primates were the ancestors of a lineage that would one day question the meaning of its own existence. But the Earth was not done changing. Continents continued to drift, shaping new climates and ecosystems. India collided with Asia, raising the Himalayas and altering global weather patterns. Antarctica drifted south and froze, beginning the long cooling trend that would define the coming epochs. Forests began to retreat from the poles, replaced by open grasslands. With the rise of grass came new evolutionary challenges and opportunities. Grazing mammals adapted to the tough, fibrous diet. Their teeth became stronger, their legs longer, their bodies leaner for speed. Predators evolved alongside them, learning to chase in packs and strike with coordination. The open plains became the new theatre of evolution's endless play. By the Oligocene epoch, 30 million years after the extinction, the age of mammals had reached its stride. Elephants, camels, cats, and dogs all had their ancestors in this time. The diversity was astonishing. Mammals dominated every continent, from the jungles of Africa to the frozen tundras of the north. Birds filled the skies, and reptiles continued their quiet reign in the warmth of rivers and deserts. And yet, through all these changes, the echoes of the dinosaurs lingered. Evolution carried their lessons forward. The balance between predator and prey, the importance of adaptability, the fragility of dominance. Just as the dinosaurs had once ruled through diversity, so too did the mammals. They too would rise to greatness, and one day, perhaps, face their own reckoning. The Miocene epoch brought cooler climates and the spread of open grasslands. Forests gave way to savannas, and with them came the first true herds. Horses, antelopes, and elephants roamed the plains, followed by prides of lions and packs of canines. In Africa, a special lineage of primates began to walk upright. They were not yet human, but they had taken their first step toward it. Evolution, once again, was preparing for transformation. The world the mammals inherited was one of constant change. Ice ages came and went, sea levels rose and fell, continents shifted, and species evolved, adapted, and disappeared. But through it all, life endured, as it always had. The age of mammals was not just a continuation, it was a rebirth. The dinosaurs' fall had cleared the way for this new world to emerge. Their extinction had not destroyed life, it had redefined it. The forests that stretched across the continents, carried the nutrients left behind by the ancient giants. The oceans still bore traces of their calcium and carbon. Every mountain, every plain, every drop of rain was connected to the world that came before. The mammals, the new rulers of the earth, carried the torch forward, but they were walking on the bones of those who came before. Their story was not separate from the dinosaurs. It was born from their ashes. And so the cycle continued to rise, rain, fall, and renewal, the eternal rhythm of the planet, each age learning from the last, each extinction giving birth to something greater. The dinosaurs had once defined what life could be. The mammals, inheriting their world, would go on to define what life could become. For in every beginning, there is always the shadow of an ending, and in every ending, the spark of a beginning waits quiet, patient, eternal. The earth turns as it always has, and life, as it always will, goes on.